All right, guys. So in our next series here, finally decided to open the Pandora's box into the world of healing. And what better show to start with than Mistweavers? So, of course, we picked up three of the most badass Mistweavers. So, gentlemen, hello. Fatal, Dhaubbs, Abelito, hello, guys. Why don't you give a quick little intro for yourselves? Abelito, go ahead.
Hey, I'm Abelito. I'm around Peak almost all the time. I maintain the WoW Analyzer for Mistweaver Monk, stole that from Anomaly, and I do most of the guide writing for Mistweaver on Peak of Serenity.
All right, Fatal. Oh, I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry.
There we go.
Push to talk to the thing.
He's a ventriloquist.
Yeah. Fatalbones. And I help Abe write a lot of the guides, do a lot of the editing over at Peak. I've been a member and veteran there for multiple expansions now. And yeah, long time Mistweaver since Mist Pandaria.
All right. And Dhaubbs, who's standing perfectly still for the entire show.
Hey, I'm Dhaubbs. I've been healing since 2007, mistweaving for the last 6 years, and the only other notable thing I've done is I was one of the founding members of BDGG.
Oh, all right.
So thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you guys here. Yeah, my pleasure having you. So, I didn't, we've done a couple of these shows already, or a few of these shows, and they've been all DPS-centric, so far at least. And, I kind of had a feeling as to what was going to go on with each of the shows, especially because we started with, quote-unquote meme specs, or specs that were having a tough time. I didn't really know what to expect with Mistweaver, but now that I guess some of the members of the community are here in chat, and, well, you guys had a little preview before the show with me, I'm a bit worried about what I'm going to hear. But nonetheless... it is, we do need to dive in kind of the same similar format that we had before. Obviously, you haven't had much changes, but we'll get to that in a bit. It's important kind of to put everything in context first, right, as we've mentioned before. So let's go back a bit. Usually we start with Legion, and I think that is a good point to start with, but we have to, as you guys mentioned, start before Legion as well a bit. Because Legion, for a lot of classes and specs, the reason we start with that is because that's just when they did their mass revamp to a lot of things. Some good, some bad, perhaps, as we're about to see. So why don't we start there, and whoever wants to tackle this between the three of you or all of you, give us a little preview of what happened leading into Legion for Mistweavers and how it looked.
Okay, I'll spearhead this one. So, going into Legion. Prior to that, in WoD, Mistweaver had like a really, really unique mechanical and sort of fun and frenetic gameplay style. You had a bunch of interactions between abilities and stats, and you had just a very unique identity. When we moved into Legion, though, for whatever reason, instead of just sort of tweaking and adjusting, Mistweaver's got this huge, enormous revamp that threw out almost every bit of design from the previous years, and instead we got sort of this weird watered down version of a hybrid between shaman and druid. We had chain heal in the form of Vivify, but it was kind of just a worse version. We had hots, but weaker than druids. We were mobile and tanky, but not as mobile and tanky as druids. It seemed like we just didn't have a place that we belonged, really.
That was leading into Legion. Was there any major revamp to just baseline systems or resource? I mean, obviously mana, but anything...
So we lost chi. The way that Mistweaver used to play, for anyone in the audience that I guess wasn't around back then, is you used to have spells that generated chi, that cost mana, generate chi, and then you would spend chi on your more powerful abilities. It was this really cool cyclical sort of gameplay loop. To offset this extra resource, your mana cost a little. Your mana costs were a little higher than other specs, and to counter that, we had another ability called Manatee, which functioned a lot different than it does on WoW, or on Live rather. Back then, you used to build stacks of mana tea every time you went through. I think it was like 4 chi. You get a stack of mana tea, and then at 20 stacks, which was the maximum, you could just drink the whole thing and get like 80% of your mana back. So you would. It was this really like sort of cyclical loop where you would build resource, spend resource, burn through your whole mana bar, then stop and drink, get like most of your mana back, and then burn through your mana again, get most of it back, burn through it again, and like finding these moments to drink throughout the fight was really fun. And then getting like I said, this sort of like ebb and flow of building and spending chi was also very interesting. And then in Legion, we just sort of lost all that. You know what I mean? Like no more generation of extra resources, no more mana tea stacks. We're just a mana healer now. None of our abilities really interacted with each other in Legion. It was a very strange and abrupt change.
So you used to be an arcane mage healer, basically, in terms of burning mana and getting it all back. Was this kind of like normalization, or just making things homogenous? Was this like a healer-wide thing? Did this happen for other healers? That because you're saying, we just became like a mana healing class. Did they do that for all healers, or is this like particularly spicy against Mistweavers?
So I think it was, to a certain degree, healers. Well, not even really, right? Like shamans and druids stayed pretty similar to their previous incarnations. But Mistweaver itself had like a very, very uniquely different mechanical aspect to it, because it was like a spec that was born just later in the game's life cycle. So it was very weird to have them just homogenize us, and then during all that, while Mistweaver was getting homogenized and sort of had all the unique bits taken out, they build Disc, a completely new archetype of healer, just from the ground up, and take a lot of sort of the design elements of or I guess the design principles of what old Mistweaver was, and just sort of put it into Disc.
Is Disc like your Havoc Demon Hunter for DPS that you guys don't like?
That and Glimmer Pally, yeah.
Okay. Right, just asking. I want to see where the playground rules lie right now. Abelito, Fatal, do you guys agree with Dhaubbs there, as to the most part, as to kind of what happened into Legion? It sounds mostly negative to me, at least the way you guys are portraying it.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone that played Mistweaver pre-Legion, we're kind of playing a different spec than you're playing now. It's pre-Legion, you had so much more to manage, and it was so much like setup gameplay, thinking ahead, getting prepared for damage events. Now Mistweaver is a completely like different healer. It's reactive. You press a button or two when the raid takes damage, and that's most of the thought that goes into it. It's just a completely different style of healing than we had previously. And I think the most disappointing part was also what Dhaubbs said about they wrote an article about why they changed Mistweaver, and it was, I think in their words, it said their goal was to accentuate existing characteristics that define them and resolve core gameplay issues. And basically what they were saying was that they were trying to move away from setup gameplay with Uplift and Renewing Mist, and more like move away from excessive amount of setup abilities in healers as a whole. And now that's what Glimmer and Disc are, exactly. Like they're the damage setup converted to healers, and that's what we were, and we were strong. And now we're weak and not that.
You guys made a note here that says, it all started with that damn smile. Mistweaver was gutted, felt unfinished as the devs approached the deadline to release Legion. Mistweaver got a content left behind. EF had no cooldown, couldn't be used while moving. Vivify sucked. I'm not sure what SOOM was passive.
Soothing Mist.
Soothing Mist, okay. Soothing Mist was passive and then reworked in 7.2, Abelito.
Yeah, no, they just kind of, they I don't want to say we were on a good track, but like I feel like they had a good idea and then it just fell flat really hard. Because it's like the whole idea was like, okay, you essence font and you can chase the hots to use the buff, but the healing essence fonts like the bolts did was just so much more than anything you could get from the hot. So if there was damage out, you would just hit essence font and sit there hitting essence font until the raid was healed, and you couldn't move during it. So you were just like a holy priest in the fact that you're a turret and you're doing HPS.
But it was one button. You just channeled that button.
Yeah, and the best part is there's a channel, so it wasn't like, oh, let me just keep pressing it. It's like press 3 seconds later, press 3 seconds later, press. Oh, the raid's full health. Now let me move into position.
Doesn't sound great.
It was it really felt, because like, you know, Legion was arguably the biggest shakeup to the game we've ever seen, except for maybe like Cataclysm with the world change. But like I really felt like with so many specs being needed to be just totally revamped that Mistweaver, it feels like they just ran out of time for Mistweaver. There's good ideas there, but in practice it ended up being so bad. Like right now we have our cooldown mana T reduces mana cost by 50%. So the way that you optimally want to use this is during Mana T, you want to spam as many of your spells as possible, like Vivify, and then end on Essence Font because it's a long channel cast and it uses all its mana instantly. Before Essence Font had a cooldown, the play during Mana T was to just hit Essence Font 4 times in a row. Just stand still and hit Essence Font 4 times. It was like these sort of like, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to harp on it too much. It just seemed real. I mean, questionable.
Harp away. That's why we're here. So, I mean, why do you guys? Which category do you fall in here? Because it kind of goes both ways. Oftentimes, do you think that at the time of the massive Legion revamp that you guys got, was it needed? Like, was it something that nobody really asked for? You guys mentioned that it seems like they had good ideas moving forward, but they just kind of got thrown under the rug. Nothing really happened about it.
For sure, nobody asked for it. I think Blizzard's idea was that they wanted to move away from too much setup and damage converted to healing style, which could have been okay if they were consistent with that, but they took it and then in the same expansion gave it to Disc in the form of their artifact power, artifact ability, and then now it's baked into Paladin with Glimmer. So it is a case of nobody asked for it, and it made the spec design and gameplay much worse.
You guys made a note here that it was reworked in 7.2 as well, Dhaubbs.
Okay, so
well, reworked is in quotations. I need to add, by the way.
So this was like, I think this was around the time, I might be remembering this wrong, but this was right around the time that like Shadow, I think, was also getting like a big rework because things were kind of broken with Shadow. And it was billed for Mistweaver, or maybe Shadow was in 7 and 5 or something. I don't know. Either way, it was billed as like, oh, Mistweavers are kind of fundamentally broken and we're going to rework them so they're going to be playable. What they ended up doing was they just sort of aura buffed all of our healing spells. They reduced the mana cost on some of them, and then they put a cooldown on Essence Font, so it wasn't just your best spell. I mean, it's still your best spell always, but like you wouldn't be incentivized to only hit Essence Font all the time forever. It was like the term rework was very weird when only like effectively one move got mechanically changed and everything else just received buffs because Mistweaver was, I think at that point, literally 15 to 20% below the next highest healing spec.
Oof. And you guys, seems any niche you had pretty much got gutted at that point.
Oh yeah, exactly. We, at that time, and I guess still to a certain extent now, we don't bring the sorts of things that say like you want a paladin because Aura Master is real good, you want a disc because damage reduction and the ability to deal damage is really good. Mistweaver's niche was kind of exactly overlapped with Druid. A super mobile, super tanky healer that kind of just brings throughput, and Druid just did, at that point, all those things just way better. I think when we got our rework, Druid was head and shoulders the highest throughput healer above everyone else. Like it was pretty crazy.
And I mean, lack of niche, at least from my perspective, from an external perspective, seems to something that persisted for a while, leading into BFA. So I mean, to summarize, it seems the changes going from WoD to Legion, not good. And all of Legion, you guys were pretty underrepresented, underappreciated maybe by Blizzard, or just lack of changes, lack of necessary changes. And then moving into BFA, did any of these things kind of get solved? Did any big changes happen in BFA, Abelito?
So they made a few moves from Legion to BFA, which in the end didn't really affect gameplay, but it felt better. So before in Legion, as it says in the doc, like Vivify sucked, but there was a chance that you could get a proc to make Vivify a good spell for one cast. And so they decided that's not fun gameplay, and they removed that. We were all happy, and then they said, now you have some form of control over who your Vivify hits, because it's our like cleave AoE non-main spell. So like now it's whoever has Renewing Mist on them gets cleaved by Vivify. And in the end, it's like no change to gameplay, but it's one of those like quality of life things. And then outside of that, nothing really changed. Like we just kind of got like, oh, here's Soothing Mist as an active ability. It makes makes these two spells instant cast, but because of their GCD, like because their cast time is the same as the GCD, it normally is just, oh, I wasted a second clicking Soothing Mist because it does no healing, and now the person's full health in one cast because the other healer was also on top of it.
So yeah, go ahead.
To provide, I'll jump in just to provide a little context. Like in hindsight, all this is 100% true, right? At the time, things looked really, really promising, right? We were getting mechanical changes that affected spell interactions, which was a big complaint of mine. So like people were kind of really rejoicing that Renewing Mist was now the driver behind Vivify's power, especially because you could get extra cleaves. It was looking really spicy for Mythic Plus. Also, and this was sort of just a unique state of early BFA, but tanks were super not in control of their own health bar, and so that inadvertently really, really played into the strengths of Mistweaver, because now with this change to Soothing Mist being able to, one, be an active ability again, but two, allow you to cast all of your spells while channeling it, this lent itself really, really well to a design space in which tanks are kind of weak at the start of the expansion. So Mistweavers looked real strong, but as tanks became more the arbiters of their own fate, the niche that Mistweavers had just fell off the face of the earth. And so now those changes that we were really excited about and looked so promising effectively didn't really do much to change the overall health of our spec.
Okay. And moving throughout BFA, borrowed power aside, right? Like obviously people could do, bonkers stuff with corruption. Essences in general helped, right? We're focusing more on the core of the spec. Fatal. Was there anything throughout BFA that these kind of promising changes that Dhaubbs and Abelito mentioned at the beginning of BFA, where they helped in any way, where they supported? Did you guys get further changes once, like Dhaubbs said, it seemed like these promising changes fell flat? Anything?
I would just agree with that. The way Mistweaver usually works in expansions is that you start out the expansion pretty powerful because our tank healing is really good. Our single target, like triage healing, is very good. We are able to pump a lot of HPS into a single target, and that's at the beginning of expansions. That's when the tanks are most in trouble. And we don't scale the best with stats, so our power is like most prominent at the start of an expansion. As time goes on, you see this in BFA too, outside of things like Rising Mist our power was pretty steadily like stagnant, if not like declining, as other specs were steadily increasing throughout the expansion. I'm talking like relatively.
Hmm.
So nothing in BFA really to help us design wise and like gameplay wise. I wouldn't say anything prominent really happened. There was a couple changes, like Life Cocoon now scales with your HP and not like a base static amount of spell power. So that was obviously a net positive. We're gonna take that, but it doesn't fix the spec. I think they buffed Revival, but it wasn't anything huge.
Wolf Revival.
Yeah, between EP and the current tier, they did a weird move where they buffed all of our spells besides Essence Font and like just our core spells, so not our talents, by like it was like 10% or something, but they didn't affect the aura, so it was like everything but Essence Font gets buffed, and they made a Rising Mist change that, you know, broke the spec for 2 weeks, and they said, nope, that's not happening, and then we went right back down to the bottom. And like these changes they made in the end, you doesn't change how you play, doesn't change any of our issues. It's just kind of like, hey, you can kind of keep up a little bit better now.
This is upsetting me to hear.
What's especially frustrating about the Rising Mist change too is that was the one change that actually did pretty significantly change how you play. Like needing to think about how you effectively needed to plan out at least like 15 seconds in the future. It felt real good, and and its initial design was really, really good. But if it just didn't come where it did in BFA, it would have been such a super positive change, right? You have this alternate, because the other options on that row is Upwelling, which just passively sort of increases the healing of Essence Font. It doesn't change how you play at all. It's just like it might as well just be like a % healing increase, right? And so counter to that, we have this super active talent that now got buffed to the point where it can actually do healing. It felt really good. But if it wasn't for the fact that corruption exists and Mistweavers can go back and get all these Azurite pieces that have like a trillion different haste procs on them, and that Ineffable Truth exists, so you can effectively get like 75-80% cooldown reduction, and suddenly a 12-second cooldown on Rising Sun Kick to extend all your hots, becoming a 3.5, 4 second cooldown spell to extend your hots by 4 seconds. Like it would have been such a good design if it wasn't for the stars aligning of all these borrowed power systems just completely ruining the spell. And now they've nerfed it to the point where in Shadowlands, it's still an all right talent, but it's just frustrating to use.
So wait, you think it got over nerfed because it was so?
It got nerfed appropriately for the corruptions
Right.
and systems that were available to us. But now that we're going back to not insane amounts of haste, we're going back to like low numbers of stats, the nerf kind of murders it. I think we've talked about that. They could revert it back to the way it was for Shadowlands, and it wouldn't at all be broken. I don't know if they'll do that. They might, but there's other things that we would think they would do first. But in a vacuum, yes, Rising Mist was a very good positive change to the spec. It kind of reminisced of Uplift and Fist Weaving at the same time. But the way it was in its iteration with Corruption was you just got out all of your hots, including Enveloping Mist in some cases. If you had enough haste, you could just apply Enveloping Mist to the whole raid, and then devolve into like a Rising Sun Kick spamming like bot. Like you just pressed Rising Sun Kick as much as you could, as often as you could, kept your hots up, kept renewing Mist out. That was your rotation. And you did insane HPS, but it wasn't fun. Well, maybe to some people it was fun. For me, it wasn't fun because it felt like an insult to Fist Weaving, like what it could be and what it used to be. people were buying like cloth BOEs off the auction house that had haste on them because of how degenerate that playstyle became. You just needed haste. That was the only requirement, and haste corruptions. So, yes, I think Rising Mist could be healthy, just not the way it was implemented and the timing of its implementation.
So are there kind of still two or is there just really one kind of cookie cutter build for Mistweaving here in fist weaving, or can you break away from any form of fist weaving with talent build? Like, are you just kind of locked into your build?
I mean, you can kind of play, like, the talents are like kind of flexible, but it's like if you go the fist weaving route, all you're really doing is just bringing damage and doing relatively the same healing, but your damage isn't all too great. So like you can change Upwelling to Rising Mist, and like that's about it. You typically don't take Spirit of the Crane just because Manatee is just so strong. You need so many globals to make Spirit of the Crane equal to it, and it's like you can do it, but you're just bringing like Mistweaver damage, which isn't the world's best.
And would you be in? Does the fist weaving add the melee component, or is it spell based? I think it's just the fist weaving, right? In terms of
so
your
if you
physical presence to the mobs.
Yeah, so if you're not taking Rising Mist, Spirit of the Crane, or the Essence Way of the Crane, you have no reason to melee. Like the only your physical only reason to do any damage to a mob is to get your 5% physical damage buff out. But there's a Brewmaster in the raid, so they already did it. They already did it at the very start of the fight without having to try. So you can just sit in range, play like a Holy Priest, and do just as much, if not more, healing than one of the fist weaving boys.
Okay. So things, once again, unfortunately, aren't sounding great throughout BFA. I do remember talking to, Jack, for instance, at the time. I know he really started to enjoy playing Mistweaver, at least in the second half of the expansion. And I do remember the whole excitement because a lot of things became crazy for Mistweaver at one point just because of, frankly, stat boosting from corruption and just madness like that. Like, not really a lot of inherent native changes to the spec, but rather just borrowed power, making things a bit wonky. So we're at the end of BFA now, and we're a few months, obviously, already into the alpha beta cycle of Shadowlands. What's changed here, if anything, for Mistweaver going from BFA into Shadowlands? Fatal. Outside of Shadowlands systems, of course. Like, have there been any core changes to Mistweaver leading into Shadowlands?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. So, yes, Mistweaver got a few abilities back that were taken away from us, like Touch of Death. We have a new baseline like raid CD-ish ability in Invoke Yu'lon, but that's pretty much, if anyone ever used Invoke GG in BFA, it's that, but it's a dragon now. It's not really new, it's just we have it baseline. If anyone used the Essence Conflict and Strife for Way of the Crane, that's now called Invoke GG and is a talent option. Which could be a bit problematic because the only times you usually used Way of the Crane was in Mythic Plus and to pull large packs and just spin to win, do tons of damage, do tons of healing. It felt pretty cool, but with the target cap in Shadowlands and Spinning Crane Kick already doing half converted damage to healing as your single target spells, that's not really an option because you're not doing huge pulls and AoEing it down like you are in BFA. You're doing smaller controlled pulls where Way of the Crane wouldn't shine as much as it does now. But anyways, we got a small buff to a few of our core spells, Enveloping Mist, but its mana cost went up. Burning Mist mana cost went a little down. Soothing Mist got a buff, but that's not really relevant because we don't like Soothing Mist. If you're pressing it in raid, it's usually a waste of a GCD. It's not really anything notable. Vivify costs a little more mana, but nothing huge. We got a change to Fort Brew. The main changes I would say were we got new buttons in Expel Harm, Touch Death, and Invoke Yulon. Those would be the main changes.
Okay. So, essentially a bit of unpruning, but nothing really seemingly to address the core issues that you guys have kind of stated that really cropped up 4 years ago to a certain extent. So, okay, now that we've gone kind of down, I was hoping that there would be more for Shadowlands based on what you guys were saying, but now that we've kind of gone down the little history
we can
road,
talk about
we
can talk about the implementation of those abilities, because it's not been great so far.
Okay,
yeah.
why don't you go ahead, Dhaubbs, then, since we're on those abilities right now.
So we got all those abilities sort of like, rolled in at the start of the Shadowlands alpha. And I think Abe would know better than I do, but almost every single one of them, if not every single one of them, is either bugged in some minor way or completely unfunctional. The talent that gives us Way of the Crane, Invoke Chi-Ji, it still costs 25% of your mana, even though it's supposed to be free. Up until like last patch, it still had the same duration that Way of the Crane did. It only very recently got its duration changed. And I think there's some other nonsense with Chi-Ji's damage not being converted into healing or whatever. Like Expel Harm doesn't generate healing orbs, because healing orbs just like don't exist in the game right now. Almost everything they added to Mistweaver is bugged.
Also, to tag on
test.
to Way of the Crane, for some reason, even though it's supposed to and that it reads that it would, your melee physical damage, like your auto attack melees, don't get converted to healing. And they I don't know how they broke that, but apparently that's a thing.
Yeah, so in BFA, when we got Way of the Crane through Conflict and Strife, it was all of your physical damage. Never trinkets, never anything else. Just your core spells and any Azerite traits that do physical damage. And somehow in the conversion, this conversion was in the last 3 days, because that's when the patch came through. They somehow made Chi-Ji have his correct duration, but not the correct mana cost. But they removed melees from it, and from converting to healing. And the best part is, if you don't have enough mana, if you don't have 25% of your mana and you click the button, Chi-Ji still comes out, but you don't get the Way of the Crane buff, so you don't get any damage conversion whatsoever. So you've effectively put your 2-minute damage to healing cooldown on cooldown without gaining any of the benefits. And Chi-Ji itself, yeah, he does some damage, but it's like my 2-minute cooldown for 10% damage for 25 seconds. And then, you're a healer, so that's not, your goal. And then to tack on to what Dhaubbs was saying about everything being broken, they still haven't put healing orbs into the game, even though back in April they said they were going to be there. So Expel Harm right now is a completely worthless ability. You don't even put it on your bars. It does less healing than Vivify, can only be casted on yourself or your Soothing Mist target as well, which you already don't want to cast Soothing Mist. And it costs more mana and has a cooldown. So everything is just negative about it right now. And then Touch of Death is just, it's supposed to spawn healing orbs as well. They said that. It doesn't. And you also have to physically melee something for it to be able to Touch of Death them. So if you're sitting in a pack spamming Spinning Crane Kick, you're not meleeing, because Spinning Crane Kick is technically a channeled ability. So if a mob gets low and you're just sitting there spamming Spinning Crane Kick because it's the best damage button, you have to switch, wait for your melee, and then hit Touch of Death, and then go back to hitting Spinning Crane Kick constantly.
I didn't think we'd live to see the day that there were healer complaints about the AoE target cap from a DPS perspective. But okay, here we are. Okay, so not good, right? Overall, not good. It seems like, to me at least, it seems it's kind of ironic that in Legion they had all these Grandois dreams of kind of Mistweaver changes and implementation, and you guys feel like they fell short, they didn't have time, they kind of swept them under the rug. And in a way, it kind of seems like things have just kind of band-aid slapped fixed for now in Shadowlands so far. A lot of things haven't been addressed. A lot of bugs is what I'm hearing as well, which is obviously super frustrating. And I think on top of, if I'm not mistaken, because it's kind of become even more of a meme lately, your guys' feedback threads are just empty, right?
Yeah.
Devoid of any blue posts.
Yeah, so far we haven't gotten a single blue post. Every other spec has even gotten like a formal blue post, and we're sitting here looking pretty. And at one point, which it might still be true, it might not be. I know a few weeks ago it was. We were the third top class when it comes to, you know, messages on their feedback board, on their message board, but also the third lowest viewed. And I have a bad feeling that Blizzard might have also been in that, like, oh look, they're a low looked class. We'll go to the higher ones real quick.
Okay, fair. I mean, at this point, it's one of two things, right? Either the pessimistic side can definitely, understandably, come out, and not to be used as a negative term here, in that, I mean, maybe it's just once again another expansion where we're kind of swept under the rug. Hopefully, we get our bugs fixed, and it is what it is. Or, you know, a more hopeful view that we just haven't gotten our turn yet in the line of, you know, enhancement shaman changes and Shadow Priest revamp. Maybe we just haven't gotten our turn yet. It seems Windwalkers are in this boat as well, so maybe Monk is just something they've not really addressed yet. I already know, of course, personally, there's some issues with Brewmaster as well. They're performing well, but there's some irritations on that side, not nearly to the level of the other two specs. But so, I mean, I hope for your guys' sake that's the case. I don't know. But it definitely seems a pretty common theme from the shows we've done so far that a lot of the frustration lies in the lack of class communication. So once again, I'll reiterate, I think Blizzard's general communication for this alpha beta cycle has been much better than usual for systems, etc. Obviously, there's some sneaky things, and we talked about it before the show. You know, diminishing returns on secondary stats, a hot new topic. We'll talk about that later. That they don't really say anything until it's discovered, and then they blue post about it, and people get angry. But the class discussion has really been lacking. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of the frustration with you guys, as with a lot of the other specs, lies in that it would be nice if they just share what they're thinking, right? So that you guys can give proper feedback about the direction they're going in and try to help as best as you can. But when it's just silent like this, it kind of portrays a bad situation. Like maybe you're not going to get anything, period.
Yeah, if they just added to the end of some other class changes, like we are working on Monk, that would be enough to like hold us over. But we are in the dark right now, and we've given some of the most feedback and some of the most detailed feedback. Like we're doing, I don't want to be like rude, but we're like doing their job for them, and all they have to do is read it. But we haven't heard anything. So it does feel pretty bad, and I have had the optimistic point of view that you were talking about. Like maybe they're working super hard on Monk changes. Maybe they just haven't. They're working so hard that it's not out yet, and we'll be so happy, so gladly surprised when it comes around. But there's also the pessimistic side where maybe they're just lost and confused, and they don't know what to do with the spec, and that kind of like lingers.
Yeah, and to jump on the train that Fatal was saying that we've been quote unquote doing their jobs. Every cycle, every new build I've been getting on and testing everything that was broken and then everything that wasn't broken. And there's a few people in Peak that have been helping me with this, but it's like I keep updating the list. It's posted on the forum. I'm going to repost it when I update it again because the last few days have been busy. But it like all the bugs that we care about and that we know of are there, and none of them get addressed. Like the Chi-Ji aspect being broken was known about right when they introduced the talent, like right when they changed it. So when Alpha dropped, and it took them till 3 days ago to move the duration to 25 seconds.
Let me just interject for 1 second. When you say broken, do you mean literally bugged, or like the tuning's off, or
bugged?
Just bugged?
Bugged beyond belief.
Legit curious because I mean, you guys obviously know Mistweaver way better than I do. Maybe ever will. Like the Windwalker guys gave a lot of examples that honestly, like, I was like shocked to hear. Do you have any examples of some of the bugs?
I'm gonna jump into covenants here, just because those are the easy ones, and I can rattle those off real quick.
Okay.
So Bone does brew. You probably heard this from the Windwalkers, but it doesn't really do anything that's stated whatsoever. So it says, like, there's a 35% chance to duplicate like 35% of the spell that procced it, like to healing, and then also boost your Gust of Mist by X. Well, it doesn't, like, the proc rate might be right, but it does a flat like spell power percentage. So like if I hit you with Renewing Mist and a tick of it triggers it, and that tick will do like 100 healing, but the proc from Bone Does Brew will do like 200 healing, and just be completely way higher than it should. And then if you have Bone Does Brew on yourself, but no one else, and you hit your AoE spells, you're gonna be able to heal those people with Bone Does Brew procs as if they had the spell. On top of that, if you throw Bone Does Brew onto people like you should, and then you hit Vivify, everyone with Bone Does Brew gets cleaved by your Vivify, which is nowhere on the tooltip or anything. It's super great and it feels super like fun, but it's just like, how? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And then you go to the last part, which is the Gust of Mist buff. If I'm not mistaken, that one is either the wrong number or it just doesn't happen. And then if we go to Kyrian ability, Kyrian's the one that works the most, but it's strange because they recently nerfed it again, moving it from 15% mastery to 10% mastery. And they made it so now the tooltip shows your like mastery scaling coefficient added onto it. So like before it would just say 15, but if a Mistweaver pressed it, you would get 45. And now it's down to 10. The tooltip says 42, and when you press it, you get 42, which doesn't make sense since we should be getting 30 because our like mastery scaling coefficient is 3, so it should be 3 times whatever mastery you would normally get. And then like that doesn't make sense. And then we can swap to Fallen Order, which when you press it, it will summon 11 total monks, and they'll last for 4 seconds. Cool, but they don't cast Enveloping Mist like they said. They don't cast any spell besides Soothing Mist, and the only person they'll ever target is the person who cast Fallen Order. So if I cast it in a raid, I get all the healing. Nobody else has a chance to get any healing. And the best part is these things are the monks are fearable and able to put you in combat with things if they get feared into something, which doesn't sound major, but the first boss in there's I can't remember the dungeon, but there's a boss that has a small circle around him.
Halls of Atonement.
Yes, the first boss in Halls of Atonement. If you put that down, the door doesn't move. So if you put it down and the tank moves, you can potentially pull anything in that arena because the monks will run real fast and they'll be always feared when they spawn. And it's not pretty. And then I think the last one is that we're getting to is then Feline Stomp, which Feline Stomp, if you hit somebody with it, you don't really necessarily hit someone with it. So it's supposed to do like an Essence Font Bolt and some damage. And if you hit your allies with it, it might just go straight through them and not heal them whatsoever. And sometimes if you don't hit them, it will heal them still, which is great. But the other weird thing is if you hold any movement key while you're pressing it, like if you hold D, you hold A, you hold S, you hold W, E, Q, it will completely mess up the tree. So like it's supposed to shoot out, make a little pretty tree on the ground. You can stand in it for a reset chance. But if you're rotating when you do it, it will just keep trying to generate the next chunk, which the way you're facing. So you'll have like one chunk, and then you'll have another chunk somewhere completely different, and another chunk somewhere completely different. And it's not just a visual bug. If you stand on those chunks, you can reset your ability. So it's just like, how does that work? And the best part is you can never technically heal yourself with it if it's supposed to be whoever you hit, because it starts like 5 yards in front of you. So if like in a stacked raid fight, or just in general, if you want to use it, you have to like move back, hit the button, and then move back forward, which then that also limits your range on the spell, because it's like, okay, I'm just 30 yards or whatever the distance is to the melee. If I click it here, I should be able to hit the range and the melee. But you're like, oh, I can only hit one of the groups because I have to move 5 yards back to even hit the people I'm standing on.
This this Night Fae complaint speaks to my soul because I play so much Brewmaster, and I've been complaining about that exactly what you were saying since day one. It drives me insane, especially as a tank. It's so frustrating to have it spawn 5 yards from you and then need to move all the mobs and like turn them into the melee, and then the melee get cleaved, and they're like, "What are you doing?" You're like, "I'm just trying to stand in my Phaline stomp."
I'm just trying to do more damage, man. And up until last patch, last build, it just did less damage than hitting Spinning Crane Kick. So unless you wanted some like, oh, I want to get Essence Font Bolts out and then spam Spinning Crane Kick in a dungeon, as a Mistweaver, you were just better off hitting Spinning Crane Kick because it has no cooldown as a Mistweaver. It costs mana, so you don't have to worry about like running out of mana because it's like 1% of your mana or something. Like I think you generate more mana using it than you like do spending it at 0 haste. So like there were just like no benefits to hitting the spell as a Mistweaver besides maybe getting a few hots out if you have Rising Mist. Like that was your bread and butter of the spell. Like, ooh, now I got this, and now it has a mana cost, and you're like, okay, this is useless now. Everything is wrong with it, and I can't use it really effectively. And it does, the same healing as an Essence Font that was cut in a third.
Sounds like some compelling Covenant choices. I'm excited to hear about it when we get down there a bit.
Which was the least bad?
And any major core bugs, like to your class? Nothing to do with SL systems?
I would have to, like, it's just all the new stuff they brought in, like healing orbs just not being in the game. Like, you can't, like, you're supposed to get it off of Yulong, you're supposed to get it off of Touch of Death. There's a data mine tooltip for Expel Harm that says it's supposed to spawn 3 of them. None of those spells do it. Soothing Mist, or not Soothing Mist, I'm sorry. Touch of Death requiring the melee. Chi-Ji still costing mana even though it says nothing. It's just like everything is just all over the place. We're just like, if I look at anything new, it doesn't work. And there's some bug with it.
Mm-hmm.
Basically everything that they brought in is broken in some respects. Which is why, backing up a little bit, I am a little concerned going forward, because we want to be optimistic and say like maybe Blizzard just hasn't got to us, but that same sort of mentality is what all of us Mistweavers were thinking during Legion when things were getting real bad. We're thinking, oh, okay, well, they just haven't got to us guys yet. We're next. I promise we're next. And then we release in this half-finished state. And now that we're entering testing, or into the tuning phase rather, where spells are getting tweaked and adjusted, I'm really, really concerned going forward that, like, I don't know, half of this stuff is bugged in some way that they can't figure out, and so maybe they're just going to cut it. I don't know. It's very concerning.
With where we are now, then, now that we've had definitely the full history of everything leading up to where we are now on beta, in your guys' opinions, time aside, regardless if we're in the tuning phase or not, etc., do you guys feel that Mistweaver just needs like a Shadow Priest style revamp at this point, or is it just like a numbers tuning thing? Like, what would you like to see? I mean, we could spend obviously days talking about what would you like to see with the class. Everybody has their own little quirks, and we want this, but like on a major scale, what do you think needs to be primarily addressed for Mistweaver before we go live?
So I think, like, philosophically, they're in desperate need of a revamp. Mechanically, I don't think Mistweaver is like particularly compelling. There's a lot of like really interesting design nuances that sort of feel really bad with our spec. In terms of pragmatic changes, I'm not sure. I don't know what is feasible at this point. Like I don't know when Shadowlands is going to release, so I would really, really love a Shadow Priest style rework. But I don't know how much time they have. I don't know how much time that would take. If the bugs are any indication, like maybe, like I'm concerned that maybe reworking the class is just like a technical nightmare. I'm not sure.
Okay, but I mean fair, but you're shying away from what you want because I get it, right? It's you feel like it's a fragile situation because even if you do get a rework, you're worried that with that rework would come bugs, understandably, which would then lead to Legion 2.0, where you start in a crappy state at the beginning of the expansion. But put the concerns of timing and bugs and whatever aside. What do you think the spec needs? Like, how do we fix it so that we're not in the situation that you guys are upset about right now? Like, what core do we need to change about Mistweaver? To me, just from listening to you guys, it sounds like you lack a niche. From a raid leading perspective, you often don't bring much to raid outside of the 5% physical debuff that a Brewmaster brings. Most of your utility, which is pretty solid, is not too it's not too translatable for raiding. Good for M+. You definitely have some good utility for M+. Every person always seems to laugh at Revival for whatever reason. Well, not for whatever reason. You guys know why. I know why. So utility, yeah, I mean, kind of to a certain extent. I can't say it's, you know, we have situations in the shows where it's like, oh, the class is generally fine, we're just lacking some utility, etc. I don't know if utility is really your downfall here, rather than, it seems to me, based on what you've said, everything you do, somebody just does better, or brings something else. You're lacking a niche. You're lacking a strength that makes people want to bring Mistweavers for raid, let's say. So what how do we fix that? What do you guys want to see?
So I know the standard complaint that everyone, and you alluded to it, is that everyone always says, you know, like, oh, Mistweaver just needs some more utility and they'll be brought. And to a certain extent, that's true, right? Like, if Mistweaver had some sort of damage reduction, they'd be a lot more palpable to raid leaders. But then you run into the issue of, like, well, does every healer need a damage reduction now? Is that just a requirement? Do we have to homogenize everything? So I think Mistweaver could have the niche of just doing a lot of throughput, right? Like, or having multiple cooldowns that you can answer. That's sort of, it looked to be the niche that Mistweaver was going to fill at the beginning of Shadowlands. We had Revival, right? But then they also gave us the cooldown of Yu'lon baseline, which was nice. And then also on top of that, Weapons of the Order, the Kyrian Covenant, looked to be just like the go-to pick because it was very strong. Even if they tuned that into a direction where it was like kind of reasonable, in those three abilities, you had a Mistweaver able to answer like a damage event once every minute with a cooldown, and that could have been in and of itself like a pretty powerful niche. Now they've nerfed some of that, so I don't know if that's going to be viable going forward. But I think if they don't change anything mechanically to address sort of like the feel good aspect of Mistweaver being fun, then in terms of how they ought to be brought to raids, then I think just increasing the amount of throughput they do, or maybe even just increasing the amount of damage they do, might be an avenue to make them more attractive to raid leaders.
Okay, so, well, I mean, once again, though, the issue is, if it's doing the amount of damage they do, then you start competing with Disc Priest, and to a certain extent, Holy Paladins, right? If it's a throughput thing, then maybe like Holy Priest right now are kind of nuts on beta. I'm not like Resto Druid, I suppose, to a certain extent from what I've seen in raid. But I agree with you. I definitely think, in general, not like a Mistweaver thing only, I think the path forward is more related to not, like, I think a bit of homogenization is okay. Not everything, right? I don't think that everyone should have a unique buff or debuff, because it's going to be a nightmare to slot 36 specs for 20. But nonetheless, what do you think are some changes, Fatal, that you'd like to see for the spec?
I mean, we wrote a forum post 4 months ago where we outlined some of the main ones. I think for me, the top two are a new mastery, especially with the news we just got about poorly scaling or diminishing returns of stats in Shadowlands, meaning that as much as Mistweavers want to stack crit and verse, because they're the only two stats that really affect all of our heals, now stacking two stats is much less desirable because they're going to diminishing return. So you're going to look elsewhere for stats like haste and mastery. And mastery is just like a avoid at all costs stat for us. It affects like 4 spells, and Soothing Mist and Enveloping Mist are not really spells you want to use it on. Like, Soothing Mist is a trap to cast. It generally is just a mistake. And Enveloping Mist often gets little value when you actually decide to cast it. It usually overheals for a ton, and adding on another instant heal to pressing that button just makes it even more likely that it's going to overheal. So the only two real abilities it affects are Vivify and Renewing Mist, and those still get amplified by Crit and Verse. There's just no reason to really stack Mastery. And Haste is all right, but we just need a new Mastery, so that Mastery is a viable option. Like if you see Mastery on your gear, you're not like, well, I'm not wearing that piece of gear. We need a new Mastery, and the Mastery is pretty clunky as it stands. I don't think anyone's excited about our current Mastery, or ever has been. And I think in terms of raid CDs, Revival is just not attractive to anyone raid leading, anyone deciding who's on the bench, what raid CDs are going to help prog this boss. Revival's not it. You have Link, you have AM, you have Barrier, you have Atonements. Why would you need Revival? It's just like, what do you bring? I bring a health stone on the whole raid. Like, okay. And Paladin brings AM. It's pretty depressing. And in terms of personal externals, while Druid might bring Ironbark and Priests bring Paints Up, we bring Life Cocoon, which isn't a DR, which is the most important part on prog, and it's just an absorb shield, which could instantly get consumed.
I will say, actually, Life Cocoon in some of the raid testing for some of the tank abilities has been nice. I'm not saying it's like
nicer than a DR.
Yeah, to a certain extent, because like for instance, there's an ability that is affected by how much health you have at the end of the hit, right? So if you absorb the entirety of the hit, you're good to go.
And it was nice on things like that for Vexiona too.
Mm-hmm.
If that comes up a lot in Nathria, sure, then it's all right. But
what if Revival cleansed bleeds as well? Can you imagine in
that?
Nathria?
I mean, yeah, I was thinking about that because the Dispel on Revival it's not reliably strong. It's not like a core part of the CD. It's not always applicable. Whereas every part of every other raid CD is always applicable. Like it's always a strength of deciding to press that button.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times the Dispel becomes more of a hindrance than a use of the spell. Like on Il'gynoth, in testing for that boss, you murdered your raid when you pressed it. Yeah.
What do you mean testing? You mean progression when somebody accidentally hits it and wipes us? Yep.
Yeah.
It's a great feeling.
Like, they had to change it so that part of your raid CD is dysfunctional so that you could press it. Like that. It's just not a strong enough part of the spell to make it worth thinking about.
And to add on to that, they've done that, and I think almost every single raid tier since Legion dropped, because spells fundamentally changed between now and when Revival was first implemented. It used to be that raid dispels were just everywhere, and you always wanted to dispel something off the raid. So having a mass dispel that hit everyone in, it used to be 100 yards, now it's 40, was really, really good. But now dispels are calculated and surgical, and having a blanket dispel will almost certainly kill you every single time. So Blizzard has to do this weird thing where they make these allowances to almost every fight, where it's like, okay, we have to blacklist this spell from Revival, blacklist this spell's fine, blacklist this spell. It's I don't know.
Yeah, it's like if you look at Eternal Palace, the second to last boss, if you hit Revival when the little AoE fear circles came out, your raid just died. They never put that on the list. So it's like, all right, to be able to effectively use Revival, and just to note, the heal comes before the dispel. So it's like, oh, I just overhealed everyone and then killed everyone. So it's like, if you wanted to effectively use the spell, you had to have you and another healer pair it up, dispel, Revival, so you can heal people and then remove the remaining two. But it's having to do a dance just to be able to hit your button when Paladin and Shaman were just click, and Priests were just click, and you're okay, everyone is fine.
Abe, I know you're definitely a little antsy to get in a word as well. What do you think? The other guys chatted about it. What do you think needs to kind of core change or revamp for Mistweavers right now moving forward?
Oh, I'm 100% in the boat with Fatal. Just mastery needs to be reworked. Like you never, like as he was saying, you're never in, like really like, oh, mastery here is helping me. You're just kind of like, all right, I hit Vivify, I hit Renewing Mist, and you're not even, depending on the raid's health. Like if everyone's full health, you're not gonna just not press Renewing Mist because people like mastery's gonna overheal. You're still gonna press it because it modifies Vivify so much more than that mastery you're getting. You're like in the instance right now, like your Vivify cleave just does 2 times as much as your mastery would. So it's like losing that like mastery to just amplify Vivify in the future is just 100% worth it. And then Vivify, you're just like, okay, I'm already gonna target this person because I like Vivify's main target does more healing. So like you just don't think about it or anything. You just it's just there. Like when you look at like a druid or something, you're like, okay, if I'm putting more and more hots on someone, I'm going to do more and more healing. And it's like, okay, I do X, I get more healing. But as a Mistweaver, it's like, I don't have that whatsoever. Like, I can't do X to get more healing. It's just, I play like I was going to play already. And it's just, very upsetting. And because of the fact there's like a quote unquote mastery aspect to Essence Font, because it's like the hot will double your mastery, it's like hard to change Essence Font without changing mastery, because it's like if you remove that aspect, well, you just like cut 10% of the spell's healing out indirectly without buffing anything else up, and you just get into this like repeating cycle where you're like, okay, this is fine. If I change mastery, then Essence Font could potentially be OP. If they don't change it, it's just not fun. And the best part is with Essence Font, you'd want to use that double mastery because that's just better healing for less mana and whatnot. But typically if Essence Font hits someone, they're going to be healthier than the next guy, so you're going to want to heal that guy who didn't get Essence Font's hot, so you're like losing more mastery too. It's just a weird cycle of mastery is our issue, and we need something done.
Do you guys, I mean, obviously bugs etc aside, do you think a good shiny new mastery would fix a lot of the issues you have, or do you feel that the spec is a bit maybe disjointed and they're kind of slapping band-aid fixes all over the place, but really we just need kind of a redesign at this point? Or is it just like mastery is the root of all evil?
Mastery, go ahead, sorry.
So I think that mastery is like a pretty significant problem for Mistweavers. Every other healer mastery is some variation of, if you meet a conditional, all of your healing gets increased by a certain percent. Paladins, it's if you're close to somebody, you get an increase. Shamans is if their health is low, you get an increase. Blah 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 blah. Mistweavers don't have something like that. We have a flat mastery that affects 4 spells, only 2 of which are actually usable. So like the spell itself is completely dead. The stat itself is completely dead. And this is like really, really troubling when you look at how classes scale. If you look at both Legion and BFA, Mistweavers like start out pretty okay, and in the case of BFA, they start out pretty strong. But as stats become more and more relevant, and we only have like 2 to choose from, like we just completely fall off because our mastery just does not do anything, amongst other reasons, of course. But like the fact that we are just like missing an entire option for increasing our throughput is a pretty significant problem, especially because that stat is completely dependent upon spells that you kind of want to avoid casting as much as you can.
So I'm sure you've given it some thought then. What would be in your mind direction that they could take a new mastery in? Or have you not?
No. As long as they just make it, the only thing they need to do is change it so that there is parity between the specs. If we get some sort of percentage-based increase to all of our healing that's dependent upon a conditional, like they do with every other healer, I think we'll be in a much better spot. Now, that is like an easy fix. They could do something more creative. Like I know a lot of people are, talking about like, oh, just make our mastery multi-strike or do some other thing. Like there are a lot of options. But if they just want a quick, easy fix, they can just, give us like a, your heals are increased by, a certain amount of percent if, you were moving in the last, couple of seconds or something, like some random conditional like they do with every other healer.
What do you think, Fatal?
I totally agree. Like, going off of what he just said and what I was saying earlier, like, I was talking about how Mastery, even though it reads that it affects 4 spells, it kind of only affects 2 because they're the only 2 attractive spells out of the 4. The problem with our Mastery, really, is that every other healer, their whole kit is amplified by their Mastery. Oh wow, I see you're reading the Mastery and it doesn't affect Soothing Mist. It should.
I only read 3
affect
things.
Soothing Mist. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if that's
just making sure. I was like, I don't want to say anything in case I sound stupid, but I only read 3 things on the tooltip.
It's supposed to include Soothing Mist.
Okay.
It's on Soothing Mist's tooltip for some reason.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it's because it's like a rank 2 or something you get it, but it's just unintuitive because it's not even every tick. It's like 1 in every 8 ticks on a deck system. So if you channel a full Soothing Mist, you'll get 1. But that's 8 seconds of only having Vivify or Enveloping Mist on one target, and it's just...
Yeah, it's on the Soothing Mist tooltip, indeed. It says each heal has a chance to cause a gust of mist on the target.
Yeah. So, anyways, just treat it like it's 3 anyways, because the Soothing Mist part's kind of relevant. Every other healer's Mastery amplifies their whole kit. Like, you look at the Mastery and you're like, okay, my class is better now. And for Mistweaver, you look at your Mastery like, okay, these 2 spells are better now. And they're not like core rotational spells. They're not some of your most healing spells. They're just 2 of your spells. Our Mastery needs to be some percentage thing. Like what Dhaubbs was saying, maybe after moving, X% more healing. Like Shamans have low health healing, which is amazing on prog. Maybe they could take some pointers from Windwalker. I saw someone say this. I don't know how it would work out, but like a combo base Mastery, like your healing spells do more healing after you have not cast the same ability in a row a certain amount of times. Something like that. Not necessarily that, but it needs to be percent performance based, not these spells do X more healing.
Okay. Abe, what do you think?
I don't know an explicit like solution to this.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't necessarily looking for like I've spent years designing this new Mastery and this is my great unveil. Like I hear you. Maybe you have, by the way. That's fine. I was just
my magnum opus.
Yeah.
I was just kind of interested in the direction you wanted it, right? Because I'm sure you guys have given it some thought. But Abe, what do you think?
I mean, it just needs to be some X, Y condition, like do X, get Y. Like, if they really wanted to, they could even dumb it down and just say get Y, like have multi-strike back. But it just needs to be something that affects the whole kit. Because another issue that is like directly affected Mastery is like, okay, I just got Yulong. That's a new spell. It does healing. Well, it doesn't affect Mastery, so Mastery is now worse. Okay, I just got Healing Orbs. Healing Orbs don't affect Mastery. Mastery is now worse. Okay, now I have Chi-Ji. Mastery doesn't affect damage, which means that it doesn't affect Chi-Ji's healing. Mastery's got worse. Okay, now I got these legendaries. Mastery doesn't affect these legendaries. Mastery just got worse. All right, I got these covenants, these conduits, any system in the game. Oh, Mastery doesn't affect it whatsoever. Mastery's worse.
Yeah, you can.
Sucks.
you can just run down the list of like any sort of like flow chart of how you want to heal. It's like, oh, a big damage event happened. I'll revival. Whoops, Mastery didn't help me there. I guess I'll press my Essence Font. Oops, Mastery doesn't help there. Rushing Jade Wind. Nope, Mastery doesn't do that one either. Like it's there's so much that it doesn't seem like a lot, right? Because it's like, oh, it affects most of your rotational abilities. Renewing Mist, Enveloping Mist, Vivify, that seems like quite a bit. But when you look at like the whole of the breakdown of Mistweaver's healing, the majority of our healing sources don't come from those sorts of events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a really crappy disconnect, to be honest. When was the last, or ever, has Mastery always been like this?
No.
So
all of Legion essentially what like Legion till now. And as to add on a little extra cherry onto this, it says Vivify, but it also like in the tooltip explicitly states primary target. So any cleave your Vivify doesn't get affected by mastery, meaning like mastery affects Vivify, but crit affects all of Vivify. So why get mastery when I can affect the whole spell, not 1/3 of it?
Why do you think? Why do you think it's taking them so long to address this or not address this? And this isn't like a bait question. Like, one of the options could always be that they lack feedback on this. It doesn't seem like that's the case. It could be that they think it's fine. It could be that they're just understaffed and haven't gotten to it. It could be that maybe they just I don't know what it could be, but like, why do you think this has taken so long to address? I mean, it seems like it's been an issue for 4 years, question mark, like since Legion.
Yeah.
So I've thought about this. I thought about this way more than I probably should have, and I want to like Blizzard is not, as much as people like to meme, Blizzard is not staffed with dumb people, right? Like these are intelligent, some of the best in their field, who are woefully underpaid to do a job that they love, so it doesn't seem to me to be the case that it's just like they're unaware of these issues. It might be like maybe a hierarchical system amongst Blizzard, like maybe they have different priorities. Mistweaver is a classically underrepresented class, so maybe it's lower on their priority list. Maybe their design philosophy is different in such that so long as you are able to complete the content with a Mistweaver, then it's fine or good enough. Also, there's some aspect of it that's, like MMOs are inherently super difficult to balance because, any sort of seemingly minor change you make can have these unforeseen consequences later down the road. Like there's a multitude of reasons. And if I want to be super charitable, I want to just say that it's probably pretty hard, but I'm quickly getting to the point where it's like I can't simp for Blizzard forever, like at some point like they've got to change something.
Okay, what do you guys think, Fatal? Abe?
I think me and Dhaubbs are very similar in that regard. Like I would agree I'm a Blizzard simp. I love Blizzard as a company. But it could be exactly that. Like, there's designers who want to help Mistweaver, who are all about helping Mistweaver. They see it's a problem, they want to fix it, but like higher ups are telling them no. The numbers don't say help Mistweaver. The numbers say help Demon Hunter or something. It could be that. It could be like, I don't know what's last on the priorities, but they definitely have the tools to fix Mistweaver. They have some of the most feedback of any class on Mistweaver, and it beats me outside of those examples why they couldn't have done it yet.
This I can't imagine. Abe will get to you in a second because I just want to expand on Dhaubbs' thought here. I can't imagine that, if they are, and they are, right? Like they're definitely passionate. They do know what they're doing. But I can't imagine that they think it's functionally normal that mastery is this way. Like it's impossible, right? It doesn't make any sense. It's illogical. Mastery is affecting your crappiest spells and doesn't affect most of your toolkit. That's an interesting thought. Abe?
I mean, I'm kind of in like the boat with Fatal and Dhaubbs. Like I can't, like I'm not as big of a Blizzard lover as everyone else. Like I love Mistweaver. What Blizzard does to it makes me angry or makes me happy. That's kind of how it goes. I'm like addicted to Mistweaver. It's a terrible addiction, but like consistently where we are and like the things I like, there's a part of me that just believes it's like it's a hierarchical chain or something that's breaking, or any of those things. It's just like they have to. I don't know. It's just they need to do something. We've given them all the feedback they need for a lot of like just bug changes like right now. Not even like, oh, mastery's a problem, and they just kind of sit there and I'm like, I did a whole QA job for you guys. I tested everything related to Mistweaver. This is what you pay people to do, and I did it for free, and I do it every single build, and it just doesn't.
Okay. So I think this kind of also these graphs are really upsetting. Thanks, Dhaubbs. I was hoping to sleep at night, but
I got you, man.
if it makes it any better, you guys won one time against Wrestler Shaman, and
by the way, that was when
That's because Battle Shaman.
Yeah, that was when you brought battle shamans that did effectively no healing for like an entire half of the fight. Oh,
that's true. Yeah, that's right. That's actually very
so
true.
The only time we had a leg up is if other healers are intentionally sandbagging. Though, to be fair, the healer balance between those is all pretty even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Holy Paladin.
Yeah, and until you like look at the end of the tier always, or the end of the expansion where there's just a little bit too big of a gap.
Yeah, no, for sure, and that goes in hand with exactly what you said with scaling, and this starts to tie back to kind of what we were talking about earlier with just lack of communication, right, on the class front, and it's the problem is you start to speculate, right? Are they just not changing anything? That's why they're not talking to us, because why post anything when their post would say, well, sorry, we don't have anything for you. Or maybe just, hey, we're getting your feedback, it's something we're looking at, whatever it may be. I totally respect that people want that peace of mind to be able to guide, right? Because right now you guys just have no idea, so you're just giving blind feedback on everything when maybe half the stuff you're giving feedback on is not something that's going to be touched, but they are moving in a different direction with Mistweaver, whatever it may be. On a more grand scale, then, now that we've kind of talked about everything, and you've shaped it in a certain direction anyways, but do you feel that the community just has an unnecessarily or unfair negative viewpoint on Mistweavers, or is that position kind of earned via the lack of changes that Blizzard has given, etc.? Or is it just truthfully a bit over-memed and it's one of those things that can definitely perform well if you play it well, etc.? Or does it kind of deserve to be, from a social perspective, kind of viewed in a more weak status?
I'd say it's a bit of both. Like, we've been weak for long periods of time, but you can do well on progression with it, but it's like you're a Mistweaver still. Like, it's weird. And even if we go from like not a raid point of view, like if we look at the MDI, the only reason we're ever brought to the MDI is because of Way of the Crane and big pulls, which is effectively deleted in Shadowlands. And because of the target cap on Chi-Ji, you just don't hit spinning crane kick almost ever now. Like, or let me rephrase, the target cap on spinning crane kick and the healing reduction from Chi-Ji, you just never hit the button now because it's almost never worth it.
Okay. What do you think, Dhaubbs? Brain just farted for a second, Dhaubbs.
It's okay, man.
Those charts, man, I'm seeing red now.
They really got you, yeah. Dude, welcome to my life for the last 4 years.
Oh, I'm lucky.
So, yeah, there's for sure a community aspect of it, right? Of course. You could... Some people that want to play devil advocate might say, right, that Mistweavers aren't performing nearly as badly as it looks, maybe because all of the very best players are choosing the very best roles. Like, maybe it just so happens to be that Paladin is so good because, the top players see that it's very good, and so they exclusively pick it, right? And to a degree, maybe that could be a little bit. I've seen that argued before, and I don't necessarily agree with it. But I think the community aspect of how Mistweaver performs is like pretty minor when it comes to its performance in general. And I think it's a lot more to do with the fact that you can get by as a Mistweaver, but there's never a reason really, outside of a few niche situations, where a raid leader, if they're being totally objective and logical and given perfect, players on either end, would pick a Mistweaver over anything else.
What do you think, Fatal? And sorry, what's the context of this graph, Abe?
Small changes having big effects.
What was the small change
That
with the peak in the valley?
Mist.
Yeah, they changed Rising Mist from 2 to 4.
Unlucky.
And we effectively, like, this it shows that we're getting like 300k HPS, but there were logs at 600k. Pieces showed a photo where their Mistweaver had 600k HPS at 50% overhealing. And
Yeah,
it's
they're
if
just-
you took a fire mage and you just said, all right, we're going to combine 5 fire mages into you. Good luck every other DPS. You're not needed anymore.
Fatal, what do you think about the community perception versus Blizzard lack of changes, etc.?
I definitely feel that like the meme status of Mistweaver is not totally undeserved because we had such a fall from grace. Like we used to be that healer. Like the Mistweaver was like you want at least one, if not more than one Mistweaver in your raid. They bring strong HPS, good damage. Like that's what we used to be, and now we're like Essence Font bot, lackluster raid CD, lackluster mastery, lackluster defensives. Why bring a Mistweaver? There are obviously some like hyperbolic things where it's like, okay, you're declining a Mistweaver from your heroic pug. Like, it's not that bad. It's not like they can't raid heal. They obviously can. People kill Mythic N'Zoth on Mistweavers. It's not undoable. It's just like the classic, why bring Mistweaver when you could bring X? Like that trap you fall into.
I mean, to a certain extent, unless we completely homogenize the game, you're always going to have that, right? Because the best players are always going to look for that 1% difference. But it seems like the issue here is certainly much greater than a min-max perspective between the healers, especially based on some of the data that you guys just shared.
Yeah.
I'm very curious as well from it's easier to have this kind of point discussion with DPS, but I'm curious from a healing perspective. Do you guys ever run into issues, raids aside, we just talked about raids, where legit you'll get denied from like weekly M+ pugs because you're a Mistweaver? Like I know for...
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
Yes.
Resto Druids.
Yeah.
People just want Resto Druids and Holy Paladins.
Yeah, I know,
I'm
like...
sure priests and shamans have the same problem as we do.
Yeah, I know from, like, back from Legion, it was happening. Like, there was times where I had done a key 2-3 levels higher than I applied to it, and they say, you're a Mistweaver, you can't do this key. And I'm like, I have the key done, and they're like, you probably bought it. And I'm like, what do you mean?
Yeah, there were points in Nyalotha prog when we were progging on N'Zoth where I tried to get just like a weekly key done, and I got declined from a group in spite of being like one of the most geared people on the server, like being in one of the most well-known guilds in the world. Like they're just like, okay, bye Mistweaver, bye.
I mean, how do you think we fix that? Because some of it, as you said, definitely Blizzard side. Let's change the mana. We need numbers. We need bug fixes. But some of it is community meta obsession side. Can you even fix that? Like, how do you approach it? Right? What do you think would get you in a situation where people are wanting to bring Mistweavers to groups, or at least not as reluctant to bring them?
So I think community perception would largely follow if numerically Mistweavers performed better. To a certain degree, it's like super hard to change the community perception, right? I think I can't remember when they did it, but Blizzard like over buffed Brewmasters at some point because the community just thought they were so bad. And I don't think necessarily, I don't agree necessarily with the philosophy of that, but like I think if Mistweaver just gets brought up to the point where it's even just like a middle of the pack, or even if it's the lowest healer, it's not the lowest by a wide margin, I think the community perception will slowly die out, you know?
Mm-hmm. What do you guys think, Abe?
Like, just the whole, like, I agree with Dhaubbs where it's like, we just need to be equal with the bottom, not the actual bottom. So then it's like, someone in their weekly 15 pug, they just say, I need a healer, not I need a resto druid, because everything else has this giant gap. But it's like, I don't know. I feel like it's a lot of gap and then the difference between the top and the rest.
Okay. Fatal?
In terms of like
how
aiding community perception.
Yeah, like how do you fix that kind of thing? Like how do you stop getting rejected from weekly 15s as a Mistweaver just because you're a Mistweaver?
I think in BFA actually, when people saw Mistweavers being brought to MDI, there was a period within these last couple months where you're not that meme class. You're like, oh, people are doing that? Okay, well, I can invite this very well-geared Mistweaver without being scared. I think there needs to be some strength like that, like Way the Crane was. Or not even like a strength, just like on par with other specs. And I think a stronger baseline, like Dhaubbs said, would improve community perception, even if they're like strong in raid, and then the community has a better perception of them, and then they're not seen as a weak class in general. So then they might be brought into Mythic Plus runs. If Mistweaver could be on par with other healers, perception of them wouldn't be as negative in general, and I think that would help you get into dungeons.
Okay.
Also, to just be clear, like I don't want to be like, I don't want this to seem like hyperbolic. You know, like obviously, I don't know about you guys, but like I'm not getting denied over and over and you know, like this is not like a thing that's happening regularly. I'm just talking about the times in which it has happened are like, you know, they're kind of ridiculous. The moments in which they happened, the reasoning given was very weird.
Okay.
No, I mean I usually play with my guild, so
yeah,
I don't need to pug.
Because from like, I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like Mistweaver relative strength in M+ is certainly better than in Raid, right? Because all of a sudden you have a bunch of utility that is actually quite useful, can be quite useful, kick in, you know, ROP, leg sweep, etc. That often is just not that effective in raiding. Obviously, you know, you can get a couple bosses once in a blue moon that it is good, but usually not so much. Okay, so then we've kind of gone over the spec and its changes and its core issues. So it's time to dive into some of the SL systems. I know we've chatted a bit about it. SL systems / a little talent tree overview. I don't know which one of you wants to tackle it, but if you want to just nail it quick row by row and just give your collective thoughts on it. Is it like cookie cutter? Is there a dead talent in there, etc.? Has there been anything substantially changed leading into SL? Whoever wants to tackle that one, I'll leave that one open.
Okay, so we touched on this really briefly, but I'll just like bang them out real quick. So Vivify got its mana cost increased, actually pretty significantly. It's more expensive now in Shadowlands than it was in Legion. But the reason for that is quite a bit more powerful than it was back then. Renewing Mist got its mana cost reduced. Soothing Mist, for some reason, got like a bit of a nerf. Recently we got our healers in BFA got a 40% aura buff that buffed all our healing spells, and that recently got rolled into all of our spell coefficients and had the aura removed. Soothing Mist, instead of getting buffed by 40%, only got buffed by 10%, so it effectively got a nerf, which was a little weird because we don't want to use that spell anyway. Yulon is made baseline. We get Expel Harm, Touch of Death, and Healing Orbs, none of which work properly. Jade Serpent statue got changed weirdly enough. It's supposed to, when you place Jade Serpent statue, it's supposed to put down a statue that puts out a half of a soothing mist on your current target that lasts for 30 seconds. But for some reason they changed it so it only lasts 8 seconds now, but it does more healing, to the point where a full channel is less healing overall, but it does it quicker. So I'm not sure how I feel about that or why they did that. It seems like it might have even been a mistake. I'm not sure about that. And then of course we got Chi-Ji as a talent in the form of Way of the Crane, which is pretty dope. We like that a lot, assuming it functions the way it's supposed to.
So overall for the talent tree, let's focus on talents now. Is there what's dead? What needs attention?
All right, if we want to go into row by row, like
just briefly, we don't have to like talk about each one for 10 minutes.
Mistrap is like semi-dead. Like you take it in Mythic Plus, but that's because in Mythic Plus everything else is bad, because it's just like Chi Burst is too risky. Chi Wave is just straight up a dead talent in all content, so it's kind of like, all right, I'll take Mistrap, and you know it can help in any weird scenario where you need extra single target healing because the tank is taking an extra amount of damage or some DPS is standing in fire. On the next row, typically the first talent in the row, Celerity, is a dead talent. Like, you can take Chi Torpedo, a lot of people do. You can take Tiger's Lust, which is technically the better choice. It's cool. On the next row, it feels bad because it's like Mana Tea just beats everything when you're looking at it from like a mana saving perspective, which that's the whole row is. Like, you have to cast a lot of Enveloping Mist to make the life cycle worth it. It's, you know, you're not already wanting to cast that spell. Spirit of the Crane needs a ton of GCDs. I think it's like, I can't remember it perfectly, but I want to say it's like 60 GCDs or something to equal a Mana Tea. And it has to be done within like the same amount of time Mana Tea's cooldown is, or it's just not worth it.
It's something along the lines of like 30 to 40% of your GCDs need to be spent on damage in order for Spirit of the Crane to beat Mana Tea. Or sorry, to match Mana Tea. Yeah.
On tier 35, the only talent that you take is Ring of Peace. Like, there was one time in MDI that took Song of Chi-Chi and it backfired and everything went to hell. It was very funny to watch. Tier 40 is, you know, relatively balanced. Like, Healing Elixir doesn't get really played ever for Mistweaver, but, you know, I know this is like a shared row between, like an awkwardly shared row, I should say, between all three specs, where it's like Brewmasters will take Healing Orb if they really don't need Dampen Harm or something weird. You know, it can work. But, you know, Diffuse Magic has its good uses, and whenever you can't really effectively use Diffuse Magic, you just go to Dampen Harm. Tier 45, I'm going to, like, Jade Serpent Statue got buffed, technically, but it kills gameplay because it's, like, every 8 seconds, because it's a hasted spell, too, so, like, hasted in the sense of how long, it, you know, the duration is, but it's, like, every 5 GCDs or 6, 7 GCDs, you have to press it again to get full value, and just in having it out and not channeling can feel really bad. But overall, besides that weirdness, like, tier 45 is fine. And then in tier 50, it's kind of like Thunder Focus Tea. Like, they're all viable, but, like, you never really want to take Focused Thunder because it's like, in Mythic Plus, Rising Mist is just better. In Raid, you can take Upwelling or Rising Mist and do good. But it's like, for some reason, if you don't want to be in Melee or something along those lines, you can take Focused Thunder in Mythic Plus. You just never take it in Raid. And, you know, PvP, it's, you know, more questionable on that row because, you know, sometimes you just don't want to be in Melee, and sometimes, you know, Essence Font isn't an important heal, so you can take Focus Thunder, but it's just never like, it never feels good to take Focus Thunder, nor does it change the gameplay as it seems like it would, because you're just like, all right, I'm gonna hit Vivify, all right, TFT's up, let me click that, all right, Vivify, all right, next spell. You don't even really think about too much, like, you just kind of keep playing as normal.
Do you ever use Refreshing Jade Wind for anything?
Yeah,
it's
it's technically the highest throughput on the talent row.
Okay.
When I say technically, you know, like, you have to be hitting it,
Right.
You know, a decent amount, not like a crazy amount, but it does a lot of healing. If you, like, a lot of healers are taking it now. Early on, when tanks are struggling with HP, it's really, like, kind of hard to justify because that extra tank healing from Jade Serpent Statue is really nice and really appealing. Just, you know, free passive tank healing that's like, okay, this tank just, like, swapped and he's like 70% health. I can just let this chill. He'll get back up to full, or, you know, whatever. But if you're, like, looking at current logs, it's easily up there with Essence Font in terms of healing,
Okay.
which nothing else is really up there in terms of healing with Essence Font. So it does a lot of healing.
To be clear, that's currently. I'm
on
unsure
beta or on BFA? What do you mean?
on BFA.
On BFA, okay.
Yeah. I'm unsure. Once Chi-Chi is working correctly, I don't know which is going to be better, right? Because, like, Chi-Chi is pretty good. Every 2 minutes, it allows you to just do a ton of damage, a ton of healing, and not cast any spells that cost mana. Or rather, you only cast one spell that costs mana, and it's very little. So you get effectively, you know, 25 seconds of just uninterrupted mana regen, which in and of itself is pretty good.
What Fatal, I'll throw this one to you. In the talent tree, what's got to go? Like, is there anything that just completely needs, like, it's just been dead for so long, it needs better numbers,
Yes.
it needs a complete redesign? What are we looking at?
Chi Wave,
Okay.
Life Cycles, probably Tiger Tail Sweep,
Okay.
and maybe Song of Chi-Chi.
Okay.
Healing Elixirs I know is good in PvP, so that remains an option. I think that row's okay.
That's also communal monk row, right?
35?
It's like
40.
Yeah.
Well,
they're both
most of
partially.
35 and 40.
Not all of 40 is communal.
Yeah.
I don't think Brewmasters
that's
have
right, there's no
diffuse
diffuse.
magic.
Yeah,
I don't
you're
think
absolutely right.
Windwalkers.
It's
Windwalkers
mostly, yeah.
don't. Yeah.
It's like half for both. Like you get half of 3,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean, partially.
Windwalkers do have diffuse.
A lot of
But anyways,
Yeah, I couldn't remember them. They're not my spec.
complaint in chat about upwelling as well.
upwelling
Yeah,
is
Chill upwelling.
upwelling.
like-
Okay, it's not. I wouldn't say toss it because the bigger idea is toss essence font. Upwelling is just exists as a stronger essence font. It's the talent you take because it does the most HPS. I don't think upwelling is the problem. I think essence font's the problem. So if
Okay.
we're talking about tossing abilities, then toss essence font. We need
And-
better design, and essence font's not it. But I wouldn't say for our talents that upwelling has to go.
Okay.
Upwelling also has like a niche kind of because it's like if you can't get into melee to use Rising Mist in raid, Focus Thunder does not even 1% HPS. Like it does literally nothing for your healing in raid essentially. But like Upwelling is your other alternative. Like I'm ranged and I don't need to be in melee, but like talent.
Okay. Okay. So particularly Chi Wave, Life Cycles, Tiger Tail Sweep, and Song of Chi-Ji are on the in the crosshairs, in your guys' crosshairs.
Yeah, I would say mainly Chi Wave and Life Cycles. Song has seen some use in MDI, like he said, like Abe said, and I know it gets used against some comps in Arena. It's not a very interesting talent. I think Tiger Tail Sweep's even less interesting. But yes, those ones mainly.
Okay. That's, I mean, the fact that they exist in this iteration, not good, but you guys aren't so badly off if that's all the main beef you have, you know? I mean, there's some trees that are way worse off in terms of cookie cutter and stuff, so I guess that's kind of like an indirect win in a bit of a way there.
PogChamp, let's go.
All right.
I think
Default.
we're the
Yeah,
first
our
healers
one
we've done,
positive.
Say that
We're
again,
the first
Fatal?
healers we've done.
Yes, yeah, that's correct.
It might be a thing just stemming from the fact that you've talked to only DPS.
Mm-hmm.
And DPS usually come down to way more of a cookie cutter build because they sim themselves. They go through like improvement websites that are available to them, and they say you should take this talent, you should take this set of talents. That's what's best. They look at parses. There's one set of talents that's best. I think for healers it's more flexible than that. Like you can take what's best for a scenario, and I don't know. I think for DPS, if a talent is not as strong as the strongest talent on that row, they see it as a problem that needs to go.
I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the whole like tier 50. It's like if I can't be in melee, Rising Mist is a bad talent, even if it's technically the highest HPS talent on the row. So I'm gonna go Upwelling. But like that changes because like a healer can easily move away from melee if you're like a Mistweaver, but you kind of can't really ask a Ret Paladin to move out of melee and change talents to do the similar damage.
Right. I actually think that's a very good point. Certainly healers are more in the direction, just like tanks, more mechanical things that are just not, like, you just can't sim that kind of stuff, right? There's just mechanical advantage that you need to understand and play with. So I actually think that's a really interesting point that you make. So overall, not too bad on the talent tree, and that's also further a good point. You guys are the first healers I've chatted with, so curious to see if that extends to future guys that we talk to. So I'll have to remember that, because yeah, certainly in the realm of DPS rather, you're right. It is like, well, nothing else on that row is good because this does the highest damage. Sometimes there were some mechanical things, but it was much more night and day or clear cut for those guys. Adventuring along our SL implementation towards the spec, you guys kind of touched on it already a bit. So I'll be like I like to say, I'll be that guy in Twitch chat for a second. What's the best covenant? Now I know numbers will change, blah blah blah, but at this point we can already start to paint a pretty damn good mechanical picture on what's looking like it's going to be, the go-to or the go-tos for Mistweaver. What do you think, Abe? You look like you're gonna explode.
It's kind of hard to still like right now. If you look at it as they currently stand, bugs included, 100% you take Bone Does Brew. But
Okay.
depending on what happens to the bug fixes, like is it actually a bug? Is this the intended thing? Like it can really shift power, but it's like Bone Does Brew show right now, everything else is garbage. Like people tested with Weapons of Order before the nerf and after the nerf to it, which there was a nerf before like the Mastery nerf, which gutted about like 70 or 90, like 7 or 96% of its power, which is a ridiculous number. It went from like 40% of your HP to 2% of your HP.
Well, do you guys know why? Because like that was obscene.
It was genuinely, it was overtuned and very strong because Revival, I'm going to use the numbers before the nerf because I have them all in my head.
Okay.
Revival would do 225% spell power to everyone, and that's a 3-minute cooldown. And Weapons of Order said anyone within 15 yards got 240 at the start and the end of your Essence Font channel. So you would hit Essence Font and you would get a Revival, a little bit better than Revival in healing wise, and then Essence Font would end and you would get another burst, and you'd be able to do that 3 times during Weapons of Order. So Weapons of Order was effectively on the high end 6 plus some change revivals in a 2-minute cooldown that didn't really alter your play. You're just kind of like, I hit this button, now I do insane HPS and nobody can compete with me. Oh yeah, and if I need to, I can throw a revival in midway through this because I'm just playing like normal.
97% nerf though, a bit too far maybe.
Yeah,
oh yeah.
If they
Slightly.
just did the target cap, I think we would be a lot better off. It's like you could look at it and still say, "Wow, this is all right." I could debate that this is good, but like target cap plus reducing it to 30% spell power, which I think it's like Soothing Mist per tick does more healing than that. Just I don't understand. Like if they wanted testing of the other covenants, I can get that, but like outside of that, I don't really understand.
Dhaubbs, what do you think? Necrolord as well?
Oh yeah, Necrolord. So funny little aspect about Necrolord. There's a Soulbind. God, the name is escaping me right now. Let me. Oh yeah, it's the Emni guy or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He has an ability. Yeah, that's it. He has an ability that makes it so your Fleshcraft does like a burst of healing to everyone around you, or to I think like 5 people around you or something, when you're channeling it. That healing, the healing from that one Soulbind is better. It's like 20% more than Weapons of the Order is now, to give you an idea of like just how dead Kyrian really is. So like Necrolord has a better version of Weapons of the Order just attached to a already pretty strong shield that they get every 2 minutes, and Bone Dust Brew, even assuming it doesn't go live with like the weird Vivify interaction, which I'm pretty sure is a bug. Even if it doesn't go live, it seems to just be like numerically the best thing that you're going to take for most situations. Yeah, I think Necrolord's probably just the play. Sadly enough.
Actually, yeah. Sorry, I'm gonna actually pile onto this because I remembered something else. There's also a conduit for Necrolords that reduces the cooldown of Bone Dust Brew based off of like every time it procs, like Bone Dust Brew's healing procs. But since we're a healer, we can get 13 hots out, we can get Rushing Jade Wind going, we can be spamming Vivify. And there's clips of this where somebody throws Bone Dust Brew and they throw it again before the cooldown, like before it's fallen off. It lasts for 10 seconds, it's got a minute cooldown. So within 10 seconds, they're reducing the whole cooldown of the spell by a minute, and it's doing it in half-second intervals. So it's like you can, if you really go hard into it, you can keep it up the whole fight and have Vivify cleave on the whole raid.
Fatal. Assume there's no bending on this one.
If you're asking about the best covenant still, it's Necrolords. I think 2 main points I want to make about covenants though. I do have a problem with the fact that they decided to tie mastery to 2 of our covenants.
Okay.
Bone Dust Brew interacts with Gust of Mist, our mastery, and Weapons of Order is a flat increase to our mastery.
Mm-hmm.
Both are things which I know. I would assume that Blizzard knows mastery is not a desirable stat for us. I'm confused why they slapped that on both abilities. Which our two strongest choices.
I
I also
Go ahead. No, sorry. Well, actually, I just want to interject for a second. I think part of that might be because they've tried to design Covenant spells class wide,
true, yeah.
but try
You're
to
right.
add as much spec flavor to it. So Mastery for Brewmaster, not really the worst stat in the world. Mistweaver though, ugh, right? So you're
Well, I
kind
don't
of
think
trapped
any of
into
the
it.
monk stats really want mastery. Like
Like
versatility would be more desirable
for
for
sure,
every monk.
yeah, I think I
spec.
definitely agree with that.
But aside from that, I think the other problem with I have it with monks, Mistweaver specifically, is like you look when Covenants got released, you look at every other healer spec and you're like, wow, those are amazing Covenants. Like that Druid one, the Frenzy, that looks cool. Like Unholy Nova for Priest, that's amazing. So much class flavor there. That's exciting to press. And then you look at Mistweaver's options here, and it's like, which, if any, are not boring to press? Like I guess which one am I taking? Which one's the least bad? Like which one's gonna feel the least worse to press every time I need to press it? It's kind of, there's no exciting options here.
Fair. Unpopular opinion. I actually like Bone Does Brew on Brewmaster. Like aesthetically, I don't know. There's something fun
Oh
about
yeah,
it.
I said Mistweaver specific. I bet it's fun
Yeah.
on Brewmaster.
But like I hear, yeah. I totally get it. There's nothing that even just from a fun perspective, let's leave it at that, is
Yeah.
so exciting to press.
Someone brought this up, and Panini brought this up in chat, and he's completely right. The Vivify Cleave part affects all monk specs. So right now, if you had Bone Does Brew in Brewmaster and you threw it at a raid and you hit Vivify, you're healing the whole raid with your Vivify now. And it's just like, even like, you could replace the Mistweaver if you need like an extra little bit of healing in one place with a Brewmaster or Windwalker just healing, and be perfectly fine.
Unlucky. Imagine not being replaced by healers, but replaced by your own other specs.
Oh, God.
The class out too. Oof.
I also
First they take our physical damage buff, now they take our
Yeah.
healing. What's next?
Oh, go ahead, Dhaubbs.
I was just gonna say, to be clear, like I don't want to like giga hype. Like I'm not saying like, oh, Necrolord is the best covenant ever. It's more that like all the covenants are very like meh, and Necrolord just happens to be our best option.
It's the lesser of
I'm
four
not-
evils.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which is, and it's kind of hard to even test, right? Because like Feline Stomp is really bugged and really undertuned. I really wish it functioned properly because that has potential to be like kind of cool. And the Venthyr ability, the mirror thing, just like has never worked properly. And even if it did work properly, the idea of it casting Enveloping Mist, a spell that is incredibly targeted, very specific, and very niche on a bunch of random people, seems like kind of bad. So yeah, there's like a lot of, all the covenants seem kind of underwhelming, and I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, right? Because on the one hand, like, dope, I don't have to worry about picking the wrong covenant because they're all kind of like whatever. But at the same time, like, why introduce a system that's so integral to the game if it's going to be such a small aspect of my character?
Yeah, you certainly don't have the best kind of problem that some of the other specs and classes potentially have, which is you're left with a difficult choice because they're all good, or like pretty good. You have more of what seems to be, at least talking to the shaman guys last week, more of a which is not the worst of the four kind of thing.
Yep.
If we're to dive a bit deeper, then now we've talked a bit about obviously the covenant stuff. Soulbinds we don't need to get into because, well, everything's technically a work in progress, but those are more static trees, less customizable. And you mentioned many specifically. I guess that's kind of the direction you'll be headed in the Necrolord covenant, right?
Yeah, looks like it, I think.
Then that being said, why don't we dive into conduits? Is there anything interesting in the world of conduits for Mistweaver that is something that, helps, to put it lightly?
Not really.
I wish I had a better answer.
Yeah, like there's some things that like they're there. They help us in number wise, but they don't help us like other people like we need. It's like you get like one of those like little band-aids for like a paper cut that are like little circles, and like you don't have any legs, and that's what you need to cover up.
So
That was a great analogy, and I love it.
that was a good analogy. So do you have? I assume, do you guys have your 5 potency ones in? I think most people do now. Unless there's any notable for finesse or endurance that you guys want to point out, it's usually the potency that are worth focusing most on. So you have the Bone Does Brew one. Bone Does Brew's shadow damage or healing is increased by 20%. When Bone Does Brew deals shadow damage or healing, it reduces its cooldown by 0.5 seconds. You mentioned that earlier. That's what you're using to kind of get it to such a low CD. But I assume this is kind of hard to test on account that it's, well, not working properly.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, that's the like only interesting one. Like that's the only one where I'm like, ooh, that might be something I want.
Just looking through them here. Abilities that activate Gust of Mist reduce the cooldown on Yulon by 0.5 seconds, and Yulon's Celestial Breath healing is increased by 10% baseline.
Yeah, so that's, like, again, it's like, okay, it's like kind of neat, but it's tying yet more things into our mastery, which we don't want. Like, I don't want to have to, but I guess I'm going to immediately walk that back. I guess technically it's not really tying it into our mastery. It's just the abilities that we're going to spam, I guess, reduce the cooldown of Jade Bond or whatever. But
Yeah.
it's like pretty
That-
non-impactful. It's all right, to be sure.
Yeah, and that conduit can also drop to literal 0 value if you take Chi-Ji, because it does not affect Chi-Ji. So, and Chi-Ji replaces Yulong, so you go from, all right, I get CDR, I get a little bit of healing, to I literally don't get anything. It doesn't reduce the cooldown of Chi-Ji, doesn't increase any healing, any damage, just does nothing.
That seems like an oversight, I would assume, but it seems like there's a lot of issues with oversights for Mistweavers right now.
Talk about it.
What else do you have here? Nourishing Chi. Life Cocoon increases healing over time received by an additional 15%, and this bonus lingers for an additional 6 seconds after the shield is broken. Before you guys answer, for me at least externally, it already seems crappy that you have an entire conduit dedicated to a 2-minute cooldown, and nothing to do with throughput.
Hell yeah, dude.
Hell yeah,
and
brother.
often you just throw out Life Cocoon for the sake of Life Cocoon, and you're not really spamming heals into that target, or not enough that 15% would be exciting.
And it's only healing over time effects. So only Enveloping Mist, only Soothing Mist, only Renewing Mist, and only Essence Font Hot. And those are already not like the only one that does valid healing for that to be boosted is like Enveloping Mist. But you're like, it's never appealing. And the best part is it's only that 15% that gets extended after the shield is broken. So it's like you go from, what is it, like 50 or 60% to 65 or 75% increased hot healing, and you just drop it down to 15% after the shield breaks, which 15% healing for essentially just healing that, like, because it affects all healers. So it's like, here, Druid, here's a 15% boost.
You're a battery.
Exactly.
I can already see the issue with this one based on what you guys have said, but Resplendent Mist, Gust of Mist has 30% chance to do 25% more healing.
Yep.
Auction out mastery buff.
Yay.
Let's go, dude.
Yep,
And it's
mastery.
not even like buffing mastery by an amount. It's a chance to buff mastery. Let's go.
Oh man, you guys aren't kidding. And then the last one, Rising Sun Kink reduces the remaining cooldown on revival by a second, and revival heals targets for 10% of revivals heal over 10 seconds.
So this is like
That's kind of
fine.
interesting, no? A bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all right. It's sort of like we had an artifact ability that sort of did similar stuff. I think it was like 30% of revivals healing got duplicated like 10 seconds later or something as a hot. So like this sort of helps the problem that revival has, just by virtue of increasing its throughput a little bit. And the reduction of cooldown, it's like pretty small, but I think Blizzard is probably a little gun shy of cooldown reduction mechanics ever since what happened with Rising Mist back in the day. And by back in the day, I mean like a few months ago. So I don't want to be too negative. It's probably a fine Conduit. I'm not sure.
I'm gonna add some negativity because this one's bugged.
Okay.
It doesn't actually do 10% of your revival's healing over 10 seconds. It doesn't even like care what your revival does. Like, if your revival crits, it does the same healing as if it didn't crit, and then it doesn't even do 10% of your revival. So like, if your revival hits, like, these are the numbers I got yesterday. It's like your revival hits for 3,000, it will do, I think it's 5 ticks of 200. It doesn't equal 10% no matter how you slice it. It's closer to 10% per tick, but it's still not even 10% per tick. Like, I don't fully understand how the math, like, okay, let me rephrase that. I know how the math lays out, because if you calculate revival with just versatility and just the old spell power value, so before the 40% aura got merged into the spell, it comes out perfect every time. But that's still not the revival we have, and it doesn't include the aura. Like, they're just, it's just doing less than it should. It doesn't make sense.
I'm sure it's just an oversight. Don't worry, it'll get fixed.
Don't worry.
Don't worry. It's just an oversight. It's, you know.
Speaking of, and this just popped into my head, and I want to throw it out. It's only tangentially related to what we're talking about, but I'm incredibly worried about the volume of bugs, because like, we can have faith that they're gonna fix all these things, but there was a point in BFA where Mistweaver's Blackout Kick is buffed by a Tiger Palm, such that every time you Tiger Palm, you get a buff that when you press Blackout Kick, it hits for an additional time. That Blackout Kick from that buff is a different spell ID, and for the longest time, it was unbuffed by our aura buffs, so it was just doing like much less damage than it should have, and that bug persisted for forever. It took so long for them to fix it. So I'm just like really, really worried about all these bugs that like at least a couple of them that are going to be detrimental to us are going to slip through.
Yeah, I think that's just a worry that pretty much everyone shares for kind of everything right now, right? And it's why you see somebody be like, "Oh God, I wish Shadowlands was here," and everyone's like, "No, you don't. You really don't.
Delay it, please.
Yes, please. We need
time.
to make sure this is all nice and shiny for us to go, because we don't want another BFA release where they were kind of using BFA 8.0 launch to fix a lot of issues up until 8.1, right? When really they could have just delayed it maybe 3-ish months and then stomped those out early. So I mean, I hear that. I understand that concern. I think everyone does. Okay, so Conduits not looking so good. Let's sweep those under the rug for a bit. Let's move on to I don't know if this is going to be any better. Legendaries.
We have one legendary that owns, and I love it.
Okay,
it's going to be the one point of positivity that this whole time Blizzard really nailed it. They hit it out of the park. Tears of Mourning is the best thing they've ever done. And what's funny about it is it's not even a new thing. They just brought back our old HFC tier bonus, and it's so good. They brought it back in exactly the way it used to function. All my fears are quelled. It's so fun mechanically. It does a lot of throughput. It feels balanced in terms of other healers. Like, they just absolutely chef's kiss, nailed it.
Like, it's not even a joke. This is actually a thing. This is amazing.
I couldn't tell if he's being sarcastic or not. I was like, what's going on?
Or no, he's not being sarcastic.
It almost perfectly works too, which is amazing. Like, the only thing that doesn't work is the tooltip, which that's fine. Like, keep the tooltip broken. I'll be happy if you just don't touch it. Just keep it as is.
So just for those watching, if you're just listening, renewing mist applies extend life to the initial target, instantly healing them for 50 or whatever amount, and increasing all healing done to them by 15% for 12 seconds. When you heal with enveloping mist or vivify, 50% of the heal is also applied to targets with your extend life effect. So you basically get short-term multiple beacons everywhere.
Yeah,
basically,
and so
like
the reason this is so good is because they kept a small interaction that existed in the original. Like, it's already like pretty good on its own, right? But it's even better due to the fact that they kept a small interaction called buffering. So in the like same frame or the same global, I guess, that the that your Vivify ends, you can apply a new Renewing Mist that'll then apply Extend Life. That Extend Life gets the full benefit of the previous cast because the game is like calculating the amount of healing that Extend Life needs to do. So you can, if you're on the ball, you have like the duration of a Vivify cast to spot like the most damaged person in your raid, and then you hit them with a Renewing Mist right at the end of the cast, and they get the full benefit of the healing. It's fun, it's interactive, and it's like sort of a way to add a little bit of extra depth and skill to the class.
Is it so good that you'll just literally don't care about any other legendaries, general monk ones and general ones included? Like, is it just that good?
So
It's not the strength of that legendary that makes all the other choices not appealing. It's all the other choices are broken or bad.
Within the
I will
Mistweaver
say-
area, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, or just in general, really. But like for the terms of just sheer worse than that. But like the only other one that you could really talk about that's like interesting is Ancient Teachings of the Monastery, which it's great. It's our favorite thing, bugged, like significantly bugged.
What's wrong with it?
It doesn't care about Rising Sun Kick whatsoever,
Okay.
and it doesn't care about your teachings of the Monastery blackout kicks. So you just sit there to optimally use this legendary right now. You sit there, you hit blackout kick, Tiger Palm, blackout kick, Tiger Palm, just in an infinite loop. No other buttons. That's the max HPS and the max like damage you'll want to do. And
Yeah, it's like something like 60 or 70% of the damage that you're doing is not being converted that it should, so it's like it's really hard to gauge the strength of this legendary. There are times like you might run it, obviously it seems neat, but it just doesn't function.
Like in Mythic Plus it might be good. Sorry for talking over you there, Dhaubbs. I thought you were done.
You're good, man.
No, like in Mythic Plus it seems pretty good, but like if you ever need healing like on a boss fight, you probably wouldn't take it. You would want more healing, which would come from Tears of Mourning. And then it also falls into some problems of the how it heals, because it just does the closest injured target. Doesn't matter where everyone else is, and it has a 20-yard range. So if you have any ranged in your group, you're most likely not hitting them. So if you're in a Mythic Plus group, you're meleeing the boss to use your legendary. The druid's out in Narnia doing his druid things like he should, and he drops to 50%, and the melee next to you drops to 10%, or I'm sorry, drops by 10%, so he's at 90%. You hit your DPS abilities, it heals the paladin or whoever else is in melee with you, and then the druid, if he runs in, would get healed, but he has to run in, and on top of that, if anyone else takes any small amount of damage, 1%, 0.01%, as long as their health is not 100%, it will just heal them instead and be like, meh.
So it's not smart healing, essentially.
No, it's semi-smart healing. Just cares about injured targets and who's closest.
So Fatal, since you were the first to mention it, talk to me about Clouded Focus and Yu'lon's Whisper, the remaining two Mistweaver legendaries. I just remember the Monk Genero ones, and they're crap, right? So we don't need to talk about those unless you really want an extra roll charge. But
and I mean, we only have 3 compared to 4.
Right.
So other legendaries, I don't think any are nearly as exciting as Tears of Mourning. Ancient Teachings of the Monastery, like he said, would be that runner-up of like cool idea. I don't think it plays out in practice or performs as well as Tear of Mourning in practice. Yu'lon Whisper is just one of our artifact traits from Legion, Celestial Breath. They just renamed it recently to Yu'lon's Whisper. It's just a small AoE heal when you press Thunder Focus T. It's kind of just worse than, because that and Tear of Mourning are both based on or focused on more raid healing, like more HPS, and Tear of Mourning just does that better. Clouded Focus, I think, is also interesting. It does rely on Soothing Mist casting, which is a little concerning. If a main theme of Castle Nathria was that, or I guess future raids after that as well, was that single target healing is so high that it stresses using Soothing Mist, then I could see Clouded Focus being used, because you're just pumping into one target, and the more you pump, the more healing they will do on like stacking, and the less mana they'll cost. but that seems like a super niche situation. So I don't think that would ever be the first one you invest in over Tear of Mourning.
Okay. And Tear of Mourning, just like Dhaubbs, you stated, is just mechanically more fun too. You seem very thrilled about the gameplay.
It's numerically fun. It was this effect specifically was what really, really solidified my love of Monk when I first started. Well, it was a little bit after I first started playing it, but like it's so good to see it come back.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good that you have those. And man, the Monk general legendaries are so bad. Like every time we had like the Windwalker show, yeah, well, just an oversight. They'll add a fourth eventually.
Yeah.
Just an oversight.
And since I like to dog on Clouded Focus, I'm sorry.
Dog away. Arf,
It
arf.
it is only effective during that Soothing Mist cast. So if I hit Soothing Mist on you and I hit Vivify, it slowly starts ramping up, and it only gets to full effectiveness after 3 casts, which you can't fit too many casts into a Soothing Mist. Like I think it's like 5 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you're just sitting there like 2 fully affected spells, hooray! And you know it's our favorite thing of bugged, where Enveloping Mist doesn't get healing boosted, which oddly enough is a lot better than what it was a little bit ago, where just none of it worked, and it actually did the inverse and made your healing less. You'd hit Vivify and you'd see your healing go down every cast, and you're like, this isn't right.
Yeah, that was a good bug.
That one brought a smile to my face. Like they're disappointing us in, or at least me. I'm not going to speak for everyone, but they're disappointing me in like some of the things, but it's like they're still making me smile and laugh at the things that do come out because they're just so unexpectedly broken.
Is there anything that's not bugged that's been introduced to Shadowlands?
Welcome to the alpha and beta phase, man. It's been
Jesus.
Are we talking strictly new or just like any form of new?
It was more of a just a kind of a half meme question, but it was like for the new stuff. It seems almost everything we go through has some kind of bug associated with it.
Yeah, the only thing that I know of that works fully is Yulong's Whisper, and they fixed the only bug, which was the tooltip was wrong, but now everything works. It's the golden child in terms of this is what needs to happen, but don't actually do it because some of the bugs are good.
Well, I can't promise that, but okay. So I'm almost worried to ask it, but in terms of prefacing this question, everybody wants to see their class and spec at a core level, nice and fleshed out, good stats, fun, functional. By functional, I mean bug-free. Good rotation, etc. Like everybody dreams of having that kind of situation, just like let's say Shadow Priest treatment got recently. For better or worse, throughout the expansions, and there needs to be some systemic interaction between specs. With the systems that are put forward for SL and the kind of things and buffs and strengths and whatnot that you can choose as a Mistweaver, does this help fill in the gaps of Mistweaver that we discussed earlier? I'm going to probably guess not, because it seems that it actually doubles down on some of your issues with mastery, like you guys said. But what do you think, Dhaubbs?
Yeah, most of the changes don't really help.
It's not the changes to its core so much. We talked about that. It's do the SL systems, conduits, soulbinds, covenants, legendaries, do those help fill the gaps left in the core design of Mistweaver currently?
So I think at this point the only one that really helps Mistweaver is Tears of Mourning. Everything else kind of just, no, okay, that's not fair. No, it is fair. Never mind. Yeah, it's basically just Tears of Mourning. There was a point where Kyrian looked like it was going to like really flesh out some niche for us, but they really nerfed it. So, yeah, it's tough. I don't know.
All right, Fatal, what do you think?
I was thinking the same thing. I think Tears of Mourning is the one very positive direction of a change they've made. It does fill in or flesh out some of our concerns. Mainly, I think it's for me reassuring that they're even thinking about that play style within that legendary. But everything else, no. I think tying mastery to almost everything is a problem. And I don't think any of the baseline changes help improve Mistweaver. It doesn't make any of our problems better. Like slapping Elon on us is cool, but it doesn't change what's wrong with us.
Yeah, and you long for those changes. Abe, what do you think?
Okay.
I'm
Okay,
angry.
man.
I've been
Yeah,
waiting
I'm-
for that for like an hour. Don't take this
No,
from me.
I've been waiting so long to find a place to put a pun, and I haven't been able to, and I'm so upset.
But go ahead, Abe. What do you think?
To jump back onto it, Tears of Morning is the only thing that's really like a direct positive where you're like, always it's great. And then like the only other one in that realm to me is adding Way of the Crane baseline for free, like no mana cost. But then it's like, it depends on the fight. When like Tears of Morning just always is there. It's always dependable, just like the Morning Dew.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that was a stretch.
Yeah, as you said that, there was a motorcycle that zoomed off into the distance in the background on my stream. And it was just quite well timed, actually. Okay. So I'm not gonna lie. It's pretty upsetting that multiple layers of systems are complete misses for you. But and correct me if I'm wrong here. It seems that a lot of it just kind of returns to. I don't want to like because people play broken telephone, so I don't want to say everything is related to the issues with your mastery. But it seems like there's a big part of it, right? A lot of the stuff that we keep touching on. I know Dhaubbs, for instance, keeps mentioning. Well, that affects our mastery, and we hate our mastery. But it seems like it's not a lot of these specific conduits and legendaries and SL systems that are meant to add to the spec that are the issue, but rather the issue stems from the core of Mistweaver itself. That if that were to get addressed, some of these might be pretty good? Question mark.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, the core of Mistweaver's the problem. I think if they fixed Mistweaver's playstyle mechanically, they could have a lot more exciting legendary options. But the legendary options just aren't exciting because within Mistweaver there aren't many exciting interactions. Like Essence Font is your heal, Vivify is an alternative heal, and use Renewing Mist on cooldown. That's like, there's not much coolness that can be added when that's what you have to work with.
And like a lot of core why that's there is because mastery. Like
Yeah.
if mastery is more flexible and fluid to our kit, they could start playing with stuff. But the way it currently stands, it doesn't really. They can't really do like, oh, mastery now affects every bolt of Essence Font. Well, that's a lot of healing that you just gave us like on our best spell already, and it's just like, oh, Essence Font now does X% more healing. Like if I'm looking at your stats right now on stream, if they made Essence Font affect bolt hits, it would double Essence Font's over double Essence Font's bolt healing, just like flat, no worries. So like they can't really toy with mastery too much without things just becoming ridiculous. They just need to like drag it away and bring someone else in new.
I mean, at this point, would you guys like a big Shadow Priest style revamp, or is it just some attention needed for Essence Font, two of the spells that you're not using, forget which ones you mentioned, and Mastery? Are those just kind of like the main culprits and everything else is generally okay?
Yeah.
I know that's kind of a loaded question, but...
No, I'd really love a Shadow Priest style rework. Like they've done incremental changes that have slowly pushed us in a better direction than when this current incarnation of Mistweaver was released. But when you compare it to like Warlords of Draenor Mistweaver, who had so many interacting spells that had their own little nuances, that interacted with stats differently. It's like, Manatee had a chance to crit like an extra stack. You had a chance based on your multi-strike for renewing mist to not consume a charge. Like, and then renewing mist itself was like tied into how uplift healed, and all of your moves tied into how manatee worked. And then you had a whole different stance where you could deal damage, and all of your moves were different, and how they cost, like their costs were changed. Like there was like so many different systems at play that came together to build like a really cool class. And now we just sort of don't have that anymore. It's all very simple. Nothing really touches anything else. It's all very separate. So yeah, I think a re-examining of Mistweaver would be pretty healthy.
I hope it's not too. I don't. The thing is, we don't know. We don't know when the expansion launches, right? Like, I don't think it's too late. I don't think we're in a strictly tuning phase, and that's it right now. We're still seeing some things happen, some at least talent swaps and stuff happen, which unfortunately isn't really the crux of your issue. And I guess one thing we didn't mention again was just like revival, because within healing itself, certainly it's something we've talked about a fair bit, but from an outside perspective, raid leading, etc., revival definitely a bit lacking. I think we're all on the same boat in that.
Yeah, I think like just some mastery boost to it would make it a lot better, because right now everyone else is somehow interacts with mastery. Tranquility, you get hot stacks and things of that nature. That's all dandy. And it's like Mistweaver, you're like, I literally just avoid a whole stat doesn't affect me, and then haste doesn't affect it either. So you're just like, crit versus int. That's my bread and butter for revival. Let's how much of that can I get?
Yeah, I think in terms of our current mastery, I wouldn't want revival to interact with our mastery as it stands, but I would love it if they changed our mastery and then made revival. Like, I don't want revival to just be like, revival heals and also does more healing as a gust of mist heal. I don't know if that would be an enticing way to take it, but if they made our mastery something more like enhances your kit, then it would be amazing for revival.
Go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say another small change. It's not, of course, I think the best solution is a revamp Shadow Priest style. When I saw the Shadow Priest change, I got excited because I was like, oh wow, they're not done with large scale changes yet. Maybe Mistweaver's coming up. So that is my most desired result from this. But there are, of course, minor changes that would help us in the short run. I do just want to mention once before stream ends that I think Manatee should be off the GCD. It would just feel a lot better. You're not delaying your healing casts when you decide to press it. Nothing is happening during that GCD, and you press that GCD when you're about to pump. And you want to start pumping now, not a second or two from now. They could even nerf it a little bit, like its duration, to compensate. I just think it is a ability in Mistweaver's kit that could really use being off the GCD.
Okay.
Yeah, and even to like double up on Manatee, in Legion it was off the GCD, so this is like a Legion to BFA change that happened. But to compensate for that, they did add 2 seconds duration to it. So it's like, you could say this is an unpruning. Just bring us back to Legion in Manatee regards, just like, they're unpruning other things from Legion, like our golden traits.
The great GCD horror is one that I've been fighting on the front lines of for a long time, so join me.
We appreciate it.
Bless you.
Buddy, we are on your team.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the changes they're probably going to do to it, which is fine, acceptable in a certain direction, is like what they did with Arcane Mage, right? Like, start caking things together, but at some point you don't have that option, right? It's not like Mistweaver suffering from queuing 7 GCDs together or something. That's not that type of GCD issue. There's a few of them, but nonetheless, let's not get into that conversation because I get all hot and bothered and then my hair's all over the place. One question that I wanted to mention. Excuse me.
Toxic.
One question.
I mean, we're all thinking it.
One last thing that I wanted to ask before I'm already taking some questions here in chat. We're running a little short on time, but I wanted to ask a bit earlier, but we started to go in a different direction, and most of the stuff at the end of our doc, as you can see, we've already, as I mentioned, you guys end up caking in different areas. So we've talked about, what do they need? What do you guys need to be better? We've talked about the community issue. We've talked about, Blizzard's responsiveness to it, etc. What I did want to ask is, relative to other healers, do you guys feel that Mistweaver has perhaps a higher barrier skill to entry? Like, is it more daunting for new players to take advantage of that, or is it one of the easier healers on that gradient? What do you guys think?
I'd say the easiest.
Really? Okay.
You hit Essence Font, there's 40% of your healing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's got a pretty low barrier to entry right now, and it used to be like pretty intensive. There was a lot of nuance. I'd say the only spec that's probably as new player friendly as Mistweaver is Holy Priest, but even that, to a certain degree, like you have like interplaying mechanics on like cooldown reduction that you have to pay attention to, whereas Mistweaver, you can kind of just follow a flowchart of, are there more than 6 people hurt? Hit Essence Font. Are more than 6 people near you hurt? Hit Russian Jadewind. Do you have enough rems up? Hit a Vivify if all those things are down. It's like pretty basic, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as they layer on top of that more opportunities for good players to be good.
Okay. All right, let's grab a couple of questions here. Revival related. How do you feel if Luminous for a Luminous barrier sort of effect for revival with a hot left on after the shield is consumed or times out? And I'll combine this with another question just a couple lines later about revival as well. Or revival giving everyone a stagger-like effect.
That'd be
So,
awesome.
yeah, I mean, the stagger effect would be amazing, but like, if we're including the heal, it kind of feels weird because it's like you have two sides of the same coin, right? Like, you want the heal to heal, and you want the stagger to stagger the damage, but the damage isn't out because you haven't had the event yet. So you want to use revival for the stagger effect, not the heal. And then when it comes to like Luminous Barrier-esque effect, the heal is still there. It's kind of still weird. If it's just like whenever the shield falls, you get healing, then it's still like, I don't know. That's a weird one if you get like a shield with it, because it's like, do I want the shield more because the mechanic's gonna hurt that much, or do I just want to bring people back up a little afterwards and then give them a shield that when it expires, they come up a little bit more, which would probably be after everyone's healed up.
I think that would be implemented much better if, like, obviously they're not opposed to just slapping on new abilities to our class like you saw with Yu'lon. I think a raid-wide stagger effect would be a much more interesting new button than Yu'lon. I think often you'd end up using the raid-wide stagger effect and then in a few GCDs afterwards using revival to heal that damage as part of a reaction to one raid damage event. But it would make us have a much stronger raid CD option, like something comparable to AM or Barrier. I think that would be very interesting.
Dhaubbs?
Yeah, so I think revival is sort of a relic of the time it was designed in, right? Like, for the design space that it's meant to exist in, it's a pretty good cooldown. But now that dispels don't really matter, I feel like they really need to just pluck that aspect out of it and instead change it with some sort of like like maybe like a shield or other thing. I think the idea of putting a stagger, giving us a stagger on a separate button, like Fatal mentioned, like even if they remove Yu'lon or something, it's like giving us that, sort of like how shamans can both Healing Tide and SLT. That would like be a pretty cool way to make Mistweaver competitive. You wouldn't even these sort of discussions are always really, really difficult because there's obviously only like generally four healing spots in a raid, but there's 6 classes that need to compete for that spot, so there's going to be some overlap. And I think having 2 specs that kind of maybe do the same thing as long as they're balanced is fine, and giving us the ability to have a stagger would be kind of cool, I think.
Okay.
Also, as a note, hopefully it's not like Brewmaster Stagger now. It's actually just like a flat stagger to all damage. Because most raid damage is magic. Brewmaster does not stagger magic anymore. That would just be like a kick in the shins. Just like, oh cool, we just got stagger. It doesn't work on any raid abilities.
But it removes bleeds.
Augers.
Where was I? There we go. I think you kind of already indirectly answered this, but just real quick, if you could bring back any Mistweaver iteration, which would it be? Abe, you go
Mr.
first.
Pandaria.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Pandaria. Abe.
Go for it. Yeah, mists.
Mists.
Or like the golden time of WoD, where we had like, I'm not gonna call it the Exodia build, but like, where you could solo heal the last raid.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Dhaubbs?
Yeah. I didn't play Mistweaver I didn't play Mistweaver seriously in Mr. Pandaria.
Okay.
So like my knowledge of the spec then is like pretty limited. So I kind of feel like it would be fun. I'd need to look into it more. But yeah, for sure, Warlords of Draenor Mistweaver was, in my experience, the most fun iteration of the class. There was a lot of different talent options that not a lot of different talent options. Rather, there was talent options that you could use in certain niches that like drastically changed how you played, which was pretty cool.
Okay. What do you think about getting Eminence back in the build?
Oh boy.
Okay then.
I don't. So like, I don't know how I feel about Eminence. On the one hand, Eminence is like kind of cool, right? Because it's like neat to be able to have your damaging abilities contribute to healing. On the other hand, in order for Eminence to be good, it sort of has to function a very narrow, specific way that Blizzard has deemed as kind of toxic. Like, it has to be a smart heal. It has to pick the most damaged targets, or else it's kind of useless, right? Because you just always run into the issue of your healing spells targeting like people who are at 99% and leaving the guy at 30% to die. And I don't know if that's like necessarily good or bad. Yeah, I've gone back and forth on this idea a lot recently.
What do you guys think, Fatal, Abe?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, kind of in a way, we kind of get like a slight version of Imminence with our Ancient Teachings of the Monastery Legendary, because it's like, oh yeah, just passively, whenever you do damage with these 3 spells, do some healing. But like, it still falls into the trap of, to me, it's like, it's not all spells, so it's like at least Ancient Teachings of the Monastery, it's like, it's not all spells, so it's not true Imminence. And, it has to be a smart heal, or it can just, you fall into the way of the crane trap, which I don't know if you've seen the clip from JB, where he just freaks out in the most spectacular way that we all feel every day when he's healing Coven with, the 3 sisters, Triad, and Waycrest Manor, and it just doesn't heal the Druid, and it keeps overhealing the 3 melee DPS that are at like 99% every time he melees.
I need to find that clip. That clip is
It's a great
That
clip.
is
It's a
gold.
great
it's
clip.
spirit animal.
Fatal, I assume you agree with these guys?
Yeah, I mean, I would say DPSing used to be a core part of Mistweaver. Currently in like BFA and looking ahead to Shadowlands, DPSing, when you decide to DPS, when you make that decision, you're only DPSing for the sake of DPS. Like Holy Paladins and Disc DPS for the sake of amplifying their healing. And they also get the DPS idea of it. Like, I'm DPSing right now, I'm contributing to the boss dying, but also I'm amplifying what I'm doing. Mistweaver is like, I'm DPSing because the boss needs to die eventually. Like, you're DPSing when you have nothing else to do. There's some interaction right now with Secret Infusion and Thunder Focus Tea with Rising Sunkick. That's not going to exist in Shadowlands. So really, you're going to be DPSing just for the sake of DPS, which
Okay.
I think deprives Monk of some of its class fantasy.
Quick one here. Would Secret Infusion make a good talent for the level 15 row?
I think Secret Infusion would be worth keeping, yeah. Like, replace Chi Wave with it, boom.
Okay.
Because of the changes they dropped last night on us, it would have to change to percent stat instead of rating. But outside of that, I'm all for it. Even if they just decided, hey, it's not its own talent, we're just going to bake it into Focus Thunder. because then you can actually have, it becomes a more competitive talent. I don't know if it would make it competitive enough to take, but it'd be interesting.
Dhaubbs?
Yeah, it would depend on the tuning. At this point, like, anything's better than than Chi-Wave, But yeah, you know what? I can get behind it. I like Secret Infusion well enough. It's probably fine to add as a talent.
Okay. You guys kind of touched on this. Usually I don't take questions that are repeats, but this one's like half different. When we discussed what kind of changes and whether or not the future changes that they add to Mistweaver, if you'd like to see them go in a niche direction, so that Mistweaver gets some kind of relatable, niche strength moving forward, or are you okay, as you just mentioned not too long ago, Dhaubbs, with them just kind of doubling down on something another healer does, as long as it's equal and you can choose freely between those two types of healers?
Yeah, so I think designing a unique specific niche is probably out of the it's probably out of the scope of what we can expect for Shadowlands. It's very difficult to do, right? There's only so many ways that you can uniquely heal. And due to the nature that healing is a zero-sum game, you're always going to bring like very specific people to do specific things. So I think like an easier solution is to just maybe give healers the same sort of make healers more equal. Even if some of their roles overlap a little bit, that's probably fine, so long as the gap is small enough such that player skill can be the factor that determines what you bring.
Okay. What do you guys think? Fatal? You don't have to answer, by the way. Like, if he just pretty much summed up what you're thinking, then you're good, but it's just if you want to touch on the note or anything.
Well, I mean, I would say yesterday, we were all sort of brainstorming about, because we see that question, it's a hard one, if we're still responding to what direction should we take. And it's not just like a thought of like, go back, hit delete, just let's revert our spec. It's more a case of like, if the way we think would be best to move forward with our spec would be some iteration of what we've had in the past. Like, it's not us just like, let's go back. I think the best direction of us is some sort of uplift, DPS oriented, setup oriented healer. I think that's where we'd want to go from here.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was 30 minutes. We talked for 30 minutes trying to figure out what to do. Not even about the whole spec, but just about essence font. And every time we would start getting in the realm of, oh, what can we do? What can we do? Even if we were going like, oh, what minor thing can we do, or what major thing can we do? It would always come back to just redesigning like old Mistweaver spells from before that, they were already good. It's like the what is it? The age old adage of like, if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what he means specifically is we were trying to figure out like, okay, how can we make Essence Font a more skill-based, maybe proactive spell to make it a little more healthy, such that you don't just want to cast it at literally every moment that a raid has taken damage. And as we were going down, we're like, okay, well, maybe we can make it so that the hot is more effective. And maybe if you're healing, if you're hot chasing, it doesn't just heal them. Maybe it cleaves to everyone with that hot. And then as we're going through it, we're like, wait a minute, this sounds exactly like Uplift. And no matter like what iteration we went down to try and like bring Mistweaver into a more healthy, proactive space, we just always wound up at like, oh, these designs kind of sound like Uplift in a new coat of paint. It's like, it's really difficult to rework the existing kit to something that isn't just a better version of what it was.
Fair. All right, last two questions because we got to get going here. So, and by the way, I'm like reading questions through chat, guys, and like mastery questions, for instance, we talked a ton about them already. They were answered. Eminence, you guys have asked a couple of times, but they just answered it, so it's a late question again. So a lot of these, if you're joining halfway through the show or whatever, there will be, you know, you can go back to the VOD or when it goes up on YouTube eventually. A lot of them were answered. Nonetheless, kind of two questions in one here because they're almost the same. But would you prefer to see? Preface is here, monks have 3 utility rows in their talents. Not many classes and specs do. Would you prefer to see something like ROP move to baseline? And in general, would you like to see some things in the talent tree move baseline to make row for more throughput talents, like some other specs have?
God, yes. Please, yes.
That is a hard question to say no to. I
Right.
don't know anyone who say no to that.
I say no.
But yeah, of course.
I mean, God, it's escaping me if this is something that wasn't or was, but I want to say Jade Serpent Statue wasn't always a talent, and I don't know why it's still a talent.
It was baseline in WoD, and then they put it as a talent for some reason.
It's like small things that it's like, if we're not going to go like hardcore, it's like, okay, let's just completely remove row 35, make Ring of Peace base. It's like, just, you know, some of the talents, bring them back to where they started.
All right, final question here. Any player power aside, just completely from an aesthetic / lore perspective, what covenant would you choose?
Kyrian. It makes the most
Kyrian,
sense for
yeah.
monks.
I was a big fan of Kyrian when it was the strongest option because I wanted to go Kyrian. Unfortunately, that's not the best option right now, but Kyrian is the most appealing to me right now, as thematically and lore based.
It would have to be Kyrian or Night Fae to me, because Night Fae is just pretty.
The old furries.
Yeah. Thematically, it's just like, you know, you have the Kyrian who are these honor-bound, order-based, incredibly disciplined people, and those tick like every single box on the monk playlist.
Yeah, like path to redemption, proving yourself. It's like what a monk is.
Expelling yourself of negative energy, quote unquote, the Shah guys. You know, like this is all very like, it's like hard-coded monk. And even if you don't take that route, Night Fae is like the other second obvious choice. You know, like they're very in tune with nature, very in tune with harmony and balance, blah, blah, blah. That's also very Mistweaver-esque. It's just sort of weird that our best choice now is Necrolord, which is like, oh, okay, the warmongering, rotting, like abominations. That sounds very monk-esque.
Oh, yeah. So metal.
Monk-esque.
Monk-esque, yeah.
All right, gents. We got raid testing soon, so we'll have to wrap it up here. There's a couple of questions we didn't get to, but we have, of course, all of your socials up there for who has them, so they can certainly reach out to you or just Peak of Serenity Discord. I'm to understand, is that right? So make sure you guys visit there. But as I said to you before the show, the last thing I definitely want to end with, as we always do, is any parting thoughts. Could be anything, completely open-ended here. Whatever you want to share, or message to the community, message to Blizzard, message to fellow Mistweavers, whatever it may be. Abe, why don't we start with you?
All right, I just want to start off. I'm not a furry. Very angry. But just tell us something, Blizzard, please. That's just like a hint, like an iota. Just be like, oh, a blue post is coming, or like, oh, we know some of these bugs exist. We're looking at them. And you know, that's it. Just want some confirmation from Daddy Blizzard.
Okay. Fatal?
What Abe said, and
That you're not a
shout
furry?
out to my guild baddies because they'll kill me if I don't, and pull the ripcord.
Okay. And Dhaubbs?
WoW devs, if you're listening, I know this whole talk seemed really, really negative. I love you guys. I believe in you. Please, it's not too late. I'm booing because I want to cheer. All right, like the things can be turned around. You guys are smart. You're gonna own this. I got you. In terms of shout outs, shout out to my boy Onion and to BDGG as a whole. Love you guys.
All right,
Love
yeah.
you, Onion.
Yeah, shout out to Onion and the Rock Gang.
Good old Onion. All right, guys. It's been a pleasure. I don't want to keep you any longer. We've certainly had our time here, and if you're going to raid test, then we gotta get that rolling as well. So thank you very much for being here, the three of you. Appreciate it a lot. that you took the time to come here, and most importantly, hopefully this gets. I know it'll get some eyes on it. It's more, hopefully you guys get what you need, or at least some of the things you need sooner rather than later, especially some communication. So hopefully those things happen, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on when they do.
Of course. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. And I think I speak for all three of us and everyone else in Peak, but if you ever want, I'm pretty sure we're all happy to come back.
Yeah, I mean, at some point things will change, right? There's a big difference between like a beta version of this show and then, as it stands now on live halfway, after the first tier or something. So it's definitely something we can look into, and hopefully we have some changes to talk about by then, because if you guys come back and nothing's changed, it'll be even more depressing. So
yeah, I always love talking about Mistweaver, so
for sure,
there's an opportunity, love it.
All right, guys, it's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot. Enjoy raid testing if you're doing it. Enjoy whatever you're doing, and I will catch up with you guys soon.
Thanks.
Catch you on the flip side.
Later, dudes.